A lot of the Christian voters had supported President Trump, because apparently, if they consider him as the next savior of...
Many of them view him as
the
Jesus.
more human laws he breaks, it's better for him, because that puts him in a higher pedestal, because, God's laws are better than humans' laws. So it's actually the more Democrats try to prosecute Trump for breaking laws, the more popular he became, apparently.
My cool, I'm on the edge. Something's taking over me. I'm gonna be down on my knees. I'm ready for this. You keep me begging for this.
This is the Ocio show with Rahul, where I have deep conversations with interesting people on topics that are meaningful, slightly personal, and perhaps controversial.
Roll with this. I could do this all day. I could do this all day. Back up, I'ma run this town. I'm headed for the top, and you know it's going down.
Welcome to the Ocio show with Rahul, where we are having conversation with Teddy Kramer today. So Teddy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. We want to start segment one with your personal journey. So you are from New York, and you work for Department of Education, and now you're a business owner in San Francisco.
How did I get there?
Well, we'll cover that. So what did you do in New York? You studied there and went to school there?
So, born and raised New Yorker. My father was a heart surgeon, working in the city for almost 35, 40 years. My mom was a teacher, specializing in English literature as well as media and communications. And I was lucky because I lived in the suburbs of New York City, so I grew up with fresh air and green grass, but I also had a family that was very engaged in city life. So I'd say every single weekend I was coming into the city.
Were you in New York, or proper New York, or upstate?
People not from New York call it upstate, but it's the suburbs. It's called Westchester County.
Westchester,
so it's
got it.
35-minute drive, 40-minute train ride into the city. But we definitely took advantage of everything New York City
Is it one of the
had
boroughs?
No, technically, so New York City is 5 boroughs: Staten Island, Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan. Westchester essentially is north of the Bronx. So the instant you get out of the most northern part of the Bronx, you're in Westchester. But again, it's super convenient. The best for people in the Bay Area, the best way to describe it's like living in Marin. But was very, very fortunate to live outside the city, have access to the city, everything from all the great restaurants to museums and arts. We were probably seeing a different show on Broadway every single month, visiting all the museums. So I was fortunate to have a childhood where I was living a daily suburban life, but engaging with the city a lot.
And you went the route of your mother on the education route.
Yep.
I'm sure your father might have been disappointed.
We had baseball to share. So I was a very, very serious baseball player, and my dad was very passionate about it. I played all throughout high school, won a state championship. I played in uni, so I was a recruited athlete. I played Division I baseball, and that's actually... And part of my journey, the first time I came to San Francisco was in 2003 as a college baseball player. So we did the tour of all the San Francisco schools, and my parents came out, and my dad took me to all the spaces. So my love story with San Francisco started in 2003 as a baseball player. But once I graduated from uni, and I decided I wanted to keep playing. And I was good, but I wasn't good enough to go professional in the U.S., but I was good enough to play professionally overseas. So I went to Australia for about 2 years. I played in the professional league over there, and then I played in Germany in the European league over there professionally, and had an amazing experience and got to travel the world and spend my 20s living the life of an athlete.
And when did you join New York City Department of Education?
So I came back from Germany in the winter of 2007. I was waiting tables looking for a job, and that spring I got an internship with an organization called Harlem RBI. RBI is a program that's involved with Major League Baseball. It stands for Reviving Baseball in Inner Cities. So all day I was doing after-school programs with kids, and then in the afternoon I was coaching them in baseball. And I really, really enjoyed working with kids. And I decided at that point I wanted to be my career. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And I did. I applied, I got in, and I was a special education teacher in the Bronx for almost 2 years.
Is this for what they call special day classes here? Is it like autism focused?
A
or
mix.
is
So
it-
you would have kind of two populations of students. One population was students with physical disabilities. Kids who just had physical handicaps, born that way, and they needed extra care and attention. And then you had kids with what you would call emotional or learning disabilities. And that was one of the biggest challenges of working with kids of that age and population is you would have a classroom of kids where half of them would have a learning disability and half of them would have an emotional disability, and you had to teach to the entire group. And there's the adage that people say, the famous saying, those who cannot work teach. Well, I would say to someone, try and teach for a week and we'll see how well you do. It's the hardest job I've ever had in my life.
It is. I used to be a part-time teacher for JA program, the Junior Achievement Program. I taught in Oakland schools and San Francisco School. I remember getting there at 8:30 in the morning, and by 3 p.m. I was done. I was so tired, just teaching. I'm not even like doing any construction or anything like that, but it was exhausting. I appreciated the teachers more after.
You really do, and you really appreciate public education too. Because you see kids who come from all walks of life and have different situations in their lives. And for a lot of them, school is the place where they get their meals. School is the place where they get safety and comfort. And it's sad if it's a place that they don't have a positive affiliation with. And I did a lot of different things as a teacher in my short career. I taught what's called adaptive physical education. So almost like a mix of phys ed, but also almost like physical therapy. I was the head librarian. I was the technology teacher. I was a literacy specialist. So I worked with a lot of different populations and different kids. And I say this to every teacher out there. You're an absolute hero if you're doing it, because it is a total challenge every single day, because you're working with kids.
Especially public schools. Like I heard from some teachers that they had to bring their own supplies, spend money to actually educate your kids who are in public schools. And I remember teaching at this school, in the Bay Area, and there was this girl who was always talking in the class, and I was a little annoyed, to be very candid, as a middle school class. And then I was asking the main teacher. I was sort of a substitute teacher for the day. Hey, what's the deal with this girl in the class? And she was, and then the teacher was telling me that she is actually, whatever you're telling in English, she's translating what you're saying to Spanish to the other girl in the class, because she just came from Mexico and she doesn't speak any English. So she's actually helping the other girl. So then, that was a beautiful story. I mean, people helping each other, and there are a ton of stories on education. So you moved to Efficiency 2.0 after.
So that was an interesting part of the transition. I was accepted to go into grad school, the New York City Teaching Fellows, in 2009, and a close friend of mine who I'd gone to high school with had started a company called Efficiency 2.0. And what we did is we ran online energy efficiency programs for residential customers. So perfect example, being in the Bay Area, PG&E was one of our customers. PG&E would pay us to run a residential energy efficiency program. So people like you and me would get a letter in the mail saying, hey, here's your energy usage for the month of January. Then we would compare folks to their neighbors so they would see how they were doing. We would then provide them with online recommendations, everything from zero cost things like, hey, only wash your clothes in cold water. That will save energy, save money on your bills and reduce your energy usage. Low cost things, move from incandescent light bulbs to, at that time, people were using fluorescents. These days, people use LEDs. So a low cost thing, you might spend $50 and you might save, $150 across the rest of the year. Then to high cost investments, right? Solar panels, high energy efficiency, things like that. Then the last component of the business was if people did actually reduce their energy usage, we would provide them with points that they could then redeem at national and local retailers. So there was a built-in rewards program. And we were a very small but mighty startup. In just 3 years, we grew our customer list to almost 50 utilities. And then we sold the company at the end of middle of 2012 to a gentleman named Tom Siebel, who has a big AI company now down in the Valley. And one of the fun...
What would the utility companies use you guys for?
So and we get this question all the time. It's like, why would a utility
they want
company
to probably get paid more, huh?
Correct. They had a financial incentive from with their PUCs, the Public Utility Commissions, to reduce energy usage. So therefore, they would pay a vendor like us to run their energy efficiency programs. We would then reduce usage across customer bases, and the utility would make almost 2x the money they would make if they got people to reduce their usage. So they had it's a very interesting question. It's like, why would a utility want people to use less? They had a financial incentive. That's the only reason. I wish I could have told you PG&E was doing it for the love of humankind, the environment, but they were doing it for financial reasons. And we had a great business behind it. Yeah. And so it was doing so well.
What were you doing for them at that time?
I was Mr. Everything. So he brought me in, we knew each other very well. And, when he made the job offer, I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, I want everyone in this company to not have to worry about anything except their job. So that meant I brewed the coffee, I cleaned the bathroom, I did HR, finance, and with every single month I picked up a new thing. And by the time we sold the company in 2012, I led the entire M&A process. I managed our data room. I knew every single detail about the company. And one of the great things, like the week before we got acquired, we actually held a giant news conference in our office with Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who was the mayor of New York City at the time, talking about all the energy efficiency measures that the city was doing, how they were partnering with us to help reduce usage across New York City. And it was an amazing milestone for us. And then a week later, we sold the company. So it was a big, amazing thing. And then we learned the harsh realities of working in startups. 6 months after the company got bought, every single one of us got fired. It was
who bought you guys?
A gentleman named Tom Siebel. Tom Siebel is a extremely successful entrepreneur here in the Valley. He started Siebel Systems, which essentially invented CRM before anything like Salesforce ever existed. However, Siebel Systems ran on floppy disks. And I think what Salesforce ate their lunch and took over the rest of the world, because Salesforce's famous thing was software with a big X, right? Yeah. No software, everything in the cloud. But he made multiple billions of dollars with Siebel Systems. He sold it to Oracle. And now he runs C3, which started out as a carbon capture company, then became an energy efficiency company, then became an IoT company, and now it's an AI company. They went public
like every other company.
They went public in 2020. And amazingly, I made a nice little chunk of change, because you invest in something in 2013, you never think anything is going to happen, and I got lucky. Cool. I wish I could tell you it was skill. I got very lucky.
Yeah, in tech, half of it is luck.
Absolutely. So then we get to the end of 2012. I don't have a job. I've got some severance, and I get a single email from a software developer that I know. One line, and he goes, "You should go work for these guys," and it's linked to WeWork. And ironically, a year before, I had actually toured a WeWork. And I walked in there, and it was a girl I was dating, and she was like, "This is my office." She was working out of a 5x5 glass cube. And I said, "This is the dumbest idea I've ever heard of in my life. Why would anybody want to work in a glass cube as their office?" And it was the original WeWork #1 on Grand Street. And I remember checking out with her. Fast forward a year and change later, and I'm interviewing for a job with them. And they're growing, not rapidly, but they're growing. I think at that point they had 4 locations. One of them, which was in San Francisco, maybe 5 locations. But
they started in New York, I believe. Right?
Everything started in New York, yeah. The first location was on Grand Street. Second one, the Empire State Building. Number 3 was in the Meatpacking District. And I was at number 4 on Varick Street, which is in kind of the west side of Soho. And I'm interviewing my job was at that time director of something called WeWork Labs. And WeWork Labs was kind of like a pseudo incubator for early stage startups. It was a floor all of entrepreneurs who were paying maybe $250 a month for a desk. Some had small offices, 4 to 5 people, but it was meant to be an ecosystem to bring in entrepreneurs to be able to socialize. And obviously, I ran the floor, I ran the facility, but the big reason they brought me in was to really curate events and help these entrepreneurs flourish. We didn't have any equity in their businesses, but we were creating an environment for them to thrive. And I interviewed. I really loved the idea. I had all this experience running company, helping sell a company, and I really just always have had this passion for facilities and real estate. And I just, despite my feelings from a year and a half prior, I was really into it. And I saw the opportunity because I saw a lot of happy customers, and I liked at that point what I saw. And in 3 days, I got hired. And January 1st of 2013, I started, and I really leapt at the opportunity. I loved helping the small businesses. I loved helping the entrepreneurs. I loved curating events to the point that, initially they wanted me to do 1 to 2 events a week. I was doing 5 events a week. Everything from VC office hours to demo days.
So the entrepreneurs there in WeWork, were they more small business or more like big tech business?
Oh no, it was
startup?
all the earliest of earliest stage startups that were
More
launched.
like potentially venture-backed businesses of future.
Potentially. Now there were some quote unquote celebrities. Billy McFarland of Firefest was one of my customers, and Billy. Every month I had to get a new credit card for his rent, but he paid. But his payment always bounced on the first, and then he would give me something new for the third. But Billy had an office there, which was fun. A company that recently did really well, it was called Jackpot. Essentially, it took a lottery, the ability to play the lottery, digitized it online. They just got acquired by, I think it was FanDuel who bought them, for a ton of money. But they started out there, and again, it was just 3 people sitting in a bullpen of desks. But it was a unique time, right? It was 2013. Startups were the rage. Cash was cheap. And people were making a run at it. We even had we hosted Reddit on my floor. Reddit had their first New York office there. It was 4 people all doing ad sales.
Is that where you moved to San Francisco with WeWork?
No, I moved to San Francisco after I left WeWork.
And then WeWork Labs, and did you do something else?
So WeWork? So within 6 months, I think just telling the truth about it, my talent was recognized, that I was not the this wasn't my first rodeo, and I could do a little bit more for the business. And my first test was they had opened up a location in LA, and they were having major problems with sales. So they shipped me out to LA for 30 days. I got myself an apartment in West Hollywood. I had a car, and every day I was there just to fix the operation in Hollywood. And really, the issue was a marketing operation. They were in the middle of West Hollywood, and LA is a city of silos, and tech is not happening in West Hollywood. It's TV, it's film, it's podcast production. So they were just marketing the wrong customer. So we cleaned up the physical operation. The place had just like a lot of junk, and we streamlined that. And I worked really closely with the general manager of the space, and we ramped up sales. And in 30 days, we went from 70% occupancy to 95% occupancy. So we fixed it, and they said, "Oh, you're good. Now you can go do Boston. Now you can go do Seattle. Now you can go do Washington, D.C." And from essentially November of 2013 until I left in the summer of 2015, I led all of WeWork's operational growth across the world. So I launched every major U.S. market for those months. I launched their first international locations in London. And then once I did number 3 in London on June 1st of 2015, I called up the COO and I said, "I'm putting in my notice and I'm leaving." I'm sure we'll get into it. WeWork was quite the adventure. It was startup at a unhealthy pace. And truly,
I gotta ask you this: have you seen We Crashed?
I could only watch about 15 minutes
Of the first episode?
of the first episode.
Well, I actually wanted to ask was how much of that is true?
Yeah,
Or maybe you've heard your ex-colleagues talk
I've heard a
about
lot
it.
of thoughts on it and feedback. Like anything, it's dramatized. I think the problem I had with We Crashed is even no matter how they paint Adam and they paint his wife and the people around him, I still think it glorifies them. And I think that's the thing I battle with WeWork is, to me, WeWork is a failure no matter how you slice it. You can talk about him making billions of dollars and all those things, but 10,000 people lost their jobs. The company filed for bankruptcy. Locations have closed all across the world. That to me is not a success. That he, organized the business.
Didn't he still recently try to take over again, or like?
Yeah, when they filed for bankruptcy, he tried to convince.
Does he still own it now?
No, he owns nothing. He owns nothing. If anything, he actually may owe them money, but I don't even know if they can claw that back because they're having so many problems. But he got some major loans from them. I mean, listen, he had all the leverage. He structured. To me, WeWork is also a company that is a reflection of the age, right? It's a true zeitgeist for the heavy growth over profit. All that matters is to get as big as possible, as fast as possible. Of the 2010s.
Because one of the complaints about WeWork, or the SoftBank company, put a lot of money into it, was that it was a tech company, Was it really a tech company or was it a glorified real estate company that used tech? So I always grapple with, is that a tech company or not?
Of course not. I mean, there was nothing about that business that was generating any revenues or brought any value from the technology.
I mean, you could book an hour or a day of rooms on your app, but
Sure,
that's
but that's
pretty
just
much it.
their rent arbitrage model, right? There was Adam's vision in early 2014 was that he was going to create a digital product that would rival LinkedIn and Facebook, and he was going to charge $50 a month for people to pay for it. And I actually stood up in an all-hands meeting with the entire company, and I got like the final question in of the day, and I said, why would a customer pay us $50 a month when our user base is like maybe 10,000 people, which for a physical space is great, but for a digital product is a failure.
Yeah.
So why would they pay us $50 a month when Facebook and LinkedIn are free? And he brushed me away. It was like, it was, Adam was one of those people who had read Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs. And he thought that he could recreate the reality distortion field. That, if I say it, you'll believe it. If I say it enough, you'll just go for it.
Yeah.
And I was, my background was facilities, operations. I understood the core business. The core business was hospitality. The core business was workspace. It wasn't a kindergarten. It wasn't a gym. It wasn't multifamily living. It wasn't technology. It was a great hospitality product. And ultimately, the way I simplify WeWork as a company is just lost opportunity, a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Did he really come to the office without shoes?
I never saw him come in without shoes, but he definitely had his own style. There were so many things that, as someone now who runs a company that you just, and has been on executive leadership teams since I left WeWork, that you just shake your head at and how to run a business. And a perfect example is, as an employee of the company, we got all our corporate news from the press. So we would raise, call it $250 million. Nobody would know. Obviously, Adam knew, executives would know, and they wouldn't tell anybody. And then the next day you'd see, and Adam would be celebrating in his office. Like, there was a Tuesday randomly where he was drinking tequila at 4 p.m, and they were partying.
Yeah.
And people were like, what's going on? And if you had any experience, like, well, something big just happened. Oh, no, it's just a random Tuesday. It's not a random Tuesday. Something just happened. Next day, headline Wall Street Journal. WeWork raises $250 million at a $4 billion valuation. Oh, well, that's what they were doing. And again,
well, employees need to know if they have equity in the company,
And then you would find out the next day. But even when you did have equity in the company, you'd ask questions like, how many outstanding shares are there? To see where you really stand. Don't worry about it, Well, how does this work? Even questions of like, hey, are we profitable? How much money are we losing? And you would hear things that I think a lot of, what I'll say, a nice way to put it, sales-driven CEOs would say, oh, if we turned off the growth switch, we'd be profitable tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's what they all say. That's what liars say.
Reminds me of some of the Silicon Valley episodes and like, don't focus on profitability, just revenue.
And that stuff, that's comedy,
Correct.
and yet this was reality.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, once I left in 2015, I just, I would just keep up. I was a stockholder, right?
Yeah.
I'd exercised my options. I owned stock. And I wanted the company to do well, but the things you would read about, you would just scratch your head. I mean, I was talking about this with someone last night. Like, WeWork had to invent its own financial metric to explain profitability, or to try and make you believe they were profitable.
What was that metric?
Community adjusted EBITDA.
Huh.
Yeah. And
I know adjusted EBITDA, which is a funny metric according to Warren Buffett, but community adjusted.
Community adjusted EBITDA, and essentially what they did is they removed every single corporate expense from the business and all marketing expenses and said, oh yeah, this is how we show profitability. And, they got laughed at by a small chunk of the world, and a lot of people went,
Yeah.
And it's no wonder, it came crashing down like a deck of cards made of, tracer paper.
Yeah. It's funny to say, but a lot of the early employees who believed in it and joined it, probably it's opportunity cost of losing all the stock and
and some
time
of them,
and effort.
And some of them made out, right? I know folks who were there early. It was one of those situations where when SoftBank came in, it was
they could buy out SoftBank, bought them out.
And I was one of those people, right? I was already gone. I was just a common shareholder, and SoftBank was offering so much money that so
people who actually took that option probably made money.
They made money, but then there were people, people who came in later, who really
Yeah.
got screwed, and
sucked.
especially the ones who exercised their options at really bad numbers,
Yeah.
because they believed. And it's, there's a very thin line between cult and culture.
Sure.
And I couldn't tell you the moment it flipped. I have ideas, but there was a moment where it flipped. I mean, one of the books was called The Cult of We, right?
Yeah.
And if you dissented, if you asked too many questions, you were gone. There were so many, really talented executives, people who came from companies like Google and GitHub. They wouldn't even last 90 days. They would come in, they'd see the operation, they'd work with him, and they would say, this isn't for
Is
me.
that the culture, or was it more from the top, issues from the top?
I think it was, you could probably say it was both. Ultimately it was him, right? The buck stopped with him and it was working for him. He was one of those, he was known for having these Monday night leadership team meetings that would start at 1 a.m, right? And that's I don't know. I just, again, as someone who runs a company now, I couldn't imagine telling people it's your Monday night. Who cares if you have a family? Who cares if you have I want you waiting here till 1 a.m. Just to start the meeting. And then, I'm going to scream a million things at you and you're going to figure out how to do it. That's not a healthy work environment.
I'm always curious about, how did these companies survive during pandemic? Did they...
By companies, you mean co-working companies?
Yeah.
Many of them didn't. Or many of them
Or even the WeWorks of the world, huh?
WeWork, didn't, in that they had to file for bankruptcy. I think you had companies like Industrious, you had companies like Convene, which really had to trim their hair. Many of them closed locations. And then I think if you're smart about it, you went directly to your landlord and say, listen, we can't even operate. The government is not allowing us to operate.
Yeah.
You gotta throw us a bone here. And I think a lot of them did. Industrious is thriving. Regis is thriving. And that's the thing for me is co-working is a great business. WeWork was just a bad company.
Yeah.
And, there are people who still, I think, will say, well, WeWork is an amazing, amazing business. They're a shell of themselves, right? They've filed for bankruptcy. They've got a completely new ownership. Their investor, SoftBank
Do
has
they
lost.
own all these buildings, or they're renting most of them?
It's all leases. And part of the advantage of them having filed for bankruptcy is they got to renegotiate all their leases. If their landlords, aka their creditors, were willing to do so. they're
Which I think they would probably be open, because they're something is better than nothing.
something is better than nothing. But then there are some who are, throwing their, flag in the sand and saying, hey, we're going to take this to court. We'd rather fight you for it. A deal's a deal. And then there are some that said, you know what, just walk away. I get, through Google alerts, I get a lot of updates that Industry and Regis are just gobbling up old WeWorks because the TI's already done, right? The build out's already been completed. All they're doing is
Probably
taking
better
out.
than what they would do.
Exactly, and
The
certainly
build-out.
and certainly cheaper. And all they have to do is take down the WeWork logo and put their logo up, and there you go. Because eventually, what happened with WeWork's design, it became very streamlined. It became very.
People can expect the same sort of facilities and look and feel and internet
and that's the
speeds.
interesting thing about co-working spaces is that there really isn't much product differentiation. Really, the only differentiation is price. At least that's how I kind of view the market now.
And location, probably.
Say again.
And locations, I'm guessing.
Location, sure, but a lot of them find themselves very, very close to each other, mostly in downtown metropolitan areas, for the most part. Occasionally, you'll see Regises in suburban areas, and that's one of the other trends is you see folks who are trying to launch products in the suburbs, assuming that work from home is not only here to stay, but more that people want. They want to get out of their house so much,
community.
but community is the word they throw around, but also that they want the membership. They want this exclusive kind of working clubhouse. We'll get to it. I have a very different thesis on that.
Yeah, so after WeWork, you went to HackerOne?
Yes.
Yeah.
So and I had been coming out to San Francisco pretty regularly since 2012. Even at the company that bought us, I did bought to Efficiency 2.0. I came out here a bit to work with them. They were in Redwood City. I was staying in the city. And then I came out a lot for WeWork. I launched a few locations here. I launched the one in Berkeley. And out of the blue, in the beginning of 2015, a recruiter had called me up. I was opening up the first WeWork in Chicago and said, I've got this amazing cybersecurity company. It's backed by some of the leading VCs, Benchmark Capital, Bill Gurley was on the board, NEA, and they're doing some really fantastic stuff, and they need someone like you. And I said, well, tell me more about it. And what HackerOne is really, it's a bug bounty platform. And what bug bounty is essentially some of the world's leading technology companies, or companies in general who have tech, are looking for vulnerabilities in their software bugs, and they can't do it alone. They have internal teams, they pay consultants, but what HackerOne does, it allows them to mobilize an online army of hundreds of thousands of, we'll call them hackers or ethical hackers or researchers, whatever you want to call them. I call them hackers, and they find bugs in their software, and they get paid cash money for it. So HackerOne was the marketplace that would connect the companies with the hackers. And on the platform, let's say, perfect example, Uber runs a leading bug bounty program. Uber would say, here's our platform. Here's the assets you can play around with. Look for every bug you can find. Here are the kind of vulnerabilities that we're looking for. Here are the kind of vulnerabilities we're not looking for. And here are the rules of the game. And if you find these vulnerabilities, here's our pay scale. For a low bug, we might pay $100. For a critical bug that could destroy our infrastructure, we'll pay as much as $50,000 to $100,000. And you get some amazingly talented people. I came into the company in the middle of 2015, and it was like any 30-person stage startup, just very engineering driven, very, starting to move into a sales driven organization, but had very limited infrastructure just from a business perspective. No HR, no facilities, no legal administration, no kind of long-term thought process on how to make sure that the capital was going to be, allocated wisely so that you don't burn through everything. And what's the first thing I did when I moved out here? I moved us into a WeWork. We moved into 535 Mission. We took over a whole floor. We were essentially the first enterprise customer on the West Coast. But I loved it. I was back into the early stage startup game. And as I tell a lot of folks, when you get into these companies, it's land grab, right? If you see something that isn't working or something that nobody's doing, take it and it becomes yours. And in less than 3 months, I oversaw all of HR, all the facilities, all of legal administration. I was, acting as an assistant to the CEO, the chief policy officer, all these things. And it was a really, really fast and furious 90 days. And then, like in a lot of places, change came. The founding CEO was replaced with a new, very, very experienced CEO. He came in, and I had been through this process before. I had been at a company where we got bought, and we had a whole new CEO. And I said, I've seen this movie, and it's tryouts. Everyone is on the block. And what I did in my first week was I sent an email to the new CEO, and I said, every day I'm going to send you a new email. And in that email, I'm going to tell you what I do here. And I said, here's the table of contents. Day 1 will be HR. Day 2 will be facilities and real estate. Day 3 will be legal admin. Day 4 will be, X, and 5 will be Z. And the week after I'd sent him all those emails, he pulled me into a meeting. He said, you're on the executive leadership team meeting now. And I became an executive. And I continued to help build the business across the next, call it 3 to 6 months. And then eventually an opportunity fell into my lap, like in all startups. And what the opportunity was we wanted to bring the product to life. It was a completely digital thing. Hackers were on all sides of the world, and the customers were somewhere, and they were interacting online, but we wanted to be able to build something in person. And I invented a product called live hacking events. And in the summer of 2016, I launched our first live hacking event in Las Vegas at DEF CON, which is the biggest, hacking event.
InfoSec, yeah.
Black Hat DEF CON, worst time of year you could ever be in Vegas. August, it's awful. But it's Hacker Summer Camp. And I rented a duplex suite in the MGM Grand. I flew in 50 of the world's best hackers. I put them up in a hotel room, all expenses paid. And every single night, we hacked a different company for $100,000. Night 1 was Zenefits, night 2 was Snapchat, and night 3 was Panasonic.
So $100,000 for the best hacker, or how does that work?
It was a pool of $100,000 that would get paid out across 5 hours. So they were literally all hacking for 7 hours, round the clock food and drink, massage tables, the whole thing. I mean, it was a luxurious experience, but it was tight. I mean, it was this small duplex suite in the MGM Grand. And each night you had a different security team. So night 1, it was Zenefits, and everything was being triaged in real time. So a hacker finds a bug, they would triage it. This is a valid bug. $100, $1,000, $20,000.
Well, you had a rate table on the bug bounty.
Exactly. Oh, and then eventually we hacked together a leaderboard so you could see who was, performing well. And after 3 nights,
was this paid by the company or by HackerOne?
So each customer paid a fee to participate, and it was our first one. So it was like, we charged maybe $10,000, right? But again,
Good publicity for HackerOne.
Amazing. And the event was a hit. hackers went crazy for it because the thing is they had never met any of these other hackers, and you started to see organic collaboration. The thing and the customer went crazy for it because they were building long-term relationships with these hackers. And the sales line would be you're going to have them hack on you for one night so that they're now going to hack on you for a lifetime.
Did they cut out HackerOne because now they build relationships directly with the hackers?
Some do, but see the benefit of something like HackerOne takes on the payments, takes on the compliance, takes on I don't want to say the liability, but they take on a lot of the relationship.
Airbnb, right? So
exactly. Yeah. So in the summer of 2016, we do our first one. It goes really well, and then in 2017 they said let's scale this. Yeah. So we did 4 events in 2017. And it was all around the world. San Francisco, Amsterdam, Vegas, New York. Goes really well. 2018, I did one every single month. And I mean some of the biggest companies in the world: Uber, Salesforce, US Department of Defense, Facebook. And there were no longer $100,000 pools of money, $1 million pools of money. We had hackers who would do one-day events, make $100,000.
So who was the best bug bounty payer?
In my opinion? Payer. So it's probably Google or Facebook. Pay the most. Google actually runs their own program. Facebook also runs their own program, but what some of them do is they will leverage companies like HackerOne or BugCrowd or some of the other bug bounty providers to do payments. They don't want to do payment processing. So what they will do is they'll work out a side gig and they'll say, hey, we're going to still take all the submissions. We're going to triage them. It'll come through our own system, but we'll leverage your payments API to just pay these folks out. But they still also want to leverage the community that HackerOne or BugCrowd or Synac has developed, or Integrity, which is a big European one. It was a wild ride. I was traveling the world nonstop. But also as I was traveling around the world, it also helped inspire me to work on what I'm working on now.
Yeah, so I was at one of the SoftBank companies, Uber, for like 7-8 years.
Yeah.
And we had our own scandals of bugs and vulnerabilities and hidden vulnerabilities. And our former CISO was the first indicted.
I'll tell you something, and I don't.
Go for it.
So that ransom payment from Joe Sullivan got paid out by HackerOne. Okay. HackerOne was used to pay out.
So you had blood on your hands.
I wasn't. Oh no, it was before it was before my time. When it happened.
Did feds knock down on HackerOne on this?
I'm 99% sure that they requested information when it happened. I mean, HackerOne didn't get in trouble for it. They just did what their customer asked them to do.
Was that a common practice though in the industry, that you have some of these breaches and just
this was a
keep quiet
with HackerOne? Absolutely not. This was a one-time thing between. I'll just say this: Joe Sullivan had a relationship with someone at HackerOne through their times at Facebook. And it was kind of the buddy system, the old boy network. They took care of each other. I even remember.
And now you probably have rules on all of this, I guess. After all this happened,
I guess. You have to. It's what happens with early stage startups, right? You have people who
Wild West.
What?
It's a Wild West.
It's the Wild West, and it's the unfortunate move fast and break things. And if your buddy asks you to do him a favor to help save face, you do it. I even remember one of the early we did a gift for Uber. And I was able to get all the reporting, and I saw there was this $100,000 payment that was made, and I said, oh yeah, because we were going to make a T-shirt that said the top payouts to all hackers. And I was like, oh, let's put this $100,000 one in there, and they said no, keep that off. And at the time, I had no clue why. And then once the news story came out, I said that's why they didn't want me to put that on. And it was a ransom payment that we processed for them. So
now they have rules around it apparently. So
and they should. The one thing is, if you talk to a lot of security experts and someone says, give me $100,000 or I'm gonna, do something really bad, a lot of people will tell you in the cybersecurity industry, don't pay.
Well, why is that?
Just, you're better off just
with all the liabilities and feds breathing down on your neck,
and you've got insurance, and you've got you pay people to do that, but almost always they're not gonna say pay it and sweep it under the rug. I mean, look what happens, right? The perfect example. You get in trouble for that.
And then after HackerOne, you did what was it? Pandemic that you did North Beach delivering.
Yeah. So I quit HackerOne. I kind of hit my ceiling there, and I was ready to I was ready to start my own thing. And even from the day I left WeWork, I knew I wanted to get back into the workspace industry. And what happened to me was at HackerOne, I was traveling literally every single month. And I always needed somewhere to work. I always needed a place to just drop in and get an hour or two done. And where did I find myself? Coffee shops, hotel lobbies, or sitting alone in my hotel room. And
You go back to your alma mater, WeWork.
occasionally I could sneak in, but then again, it was social engineering and I had to finagle my way in or ask for a favor. And,
You don't
sometimes...
want to take a membership at WeWork, huh?
Well, not really. Number one, HackerOne was going to pay for it. It was just what it was. But yeah, and at the same time, I also had like a bit of a sour taste in my mouth with WeWork and, didn't like what was happening at the company during that time. It was really, I thought they were making a lot of mistakes. So I found myself as someone who was one of these kind of digital nomads looking for a place to work. And then I just couldn't get it out of my head that every time I passed a coffee shop, I just saw people sitting in there on laptops. Towards the beginning of 2018, I'd hit my kind of ceiling at HackerOne. I wasn't really moving up the ladder anymore. I was on the executive team, but like what was next for me? Where was I going? And I kind of had made the career choice. Like I'm ready to be my own boss. I'm ready to try my own thing. And I started to do market research. And I would go into coffee shops where I saw like people on laptops, and I'd find someone and say, "Hey, if I buy you a cup of coffee and a croissant, will you let me interview you for 15 minutes just to understand your work habits?" Of course, who wouldn't take a free cup of coffee and something to eat? So I started talking to these folks, and the first question is, why are you working here? And I got two very similar intertwined answers. Answer number one was, there's nowhere else to go. And answer number two was, I don't want to be alone. And I knew that there was a problem to be solved. And I knew I had the solution for it. So in the fall of 2018, I kind of lit a match, dropped it on HackerOne, and walked out, quit, and went to start my company that I'm now running called Neon. And I did a little bit of consulting at the end of 2018 just to save some money. And then all of 2019, I just went full steam ahead. Took my WeWork shares and liquidated everything and was living off of that. And I spent all of 2019 trying to raise money, building the product, and I was, I'll call myself entrepreneurial, but this was my first time really doing it all on my own. And it's an interesting adventure. I go back and look at my first deck from 2019, and it's such a mess.
And in between Neon, you did some with the small business boogie.
That came from the pandemic.
Delivering.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll get to that. That
What
part.
was that? So you were running Neon. And
I was
then
trying to,
and then pandemic hit. How
exactly.
did that go?
So all of 2019, I'm looking to raise money. And again, I'm just raising a deck on a physical product, right? I'm looking to build this space. And I got a lot of the same answers from a lot of investors. You're great. You got good experience. Go build one and come back to me. Go hustle. And I was, I had big dreams then. I was looking to take on big spaces and all this stuff. And I had to kind of scale it back, and something that I think all entrepreneurs learn. You should dream big, but you got to be realistic at eventually at some point. And eventually I had a space in North Beach right around the corner from where we are. That's a whole other story in local politics that we'll come back to. But then I found a spot on Polk Street here in San Francisco, right by the old Lombardi Sports Garage. Tiny spot, 1,500 square feet, perfect proof of concept. And we agreed to terms. We get to lease negotiation. And it's March of 2020. And the landlord comes back to me on the lease and goes, I want to change something here. And I go, well, I don't like that. I've got to think about this. So I'm thinking, week passes by, and then all of a sudden, newsflash, the world is over, right? Pandemic comes. And so Neon is on hold. No one's going into any physical spaces. So what am I going to do next? And immediately the first thing I was kind of pushed to doing, just because I'd taken a cue from my father, who'd always, been committed to public service as a physician. My mother had always, volunteered and done things. I leapt into action. And the first thing I started doing was 6 days a week, I was delivering groceries to senior citizens in North Beach and Russian Hill, as well as the marina. I got involved with a group called Next Village, which I currently sit on the board of. Next Village supports seniors throughout San Francisco and helping them age in place. So instead of, the immediate reaction is, oh, you're getting older, go into assisted living. No, we will provide you with services that you need, right? So that you can age in place and age at home. And that's everything from helping people go to the doctor, helping people get their groceries, their medications, things like that, or even just giving them a phone call to check in to make sure that they're doing okay. And obviously in the pandemic, when you have this extremely vulnerable and very scared senior community, everyone needed help. And the biggest thing was getting them their groceries, getting them their medications. And every single day I started doing that. And from there,
These are not people living in old age homes, but like
no, they're living in their own apartments in their own
homes.
homes. But it's a vulnerable community, right? Folks who, either have pre-existing conditions or just the kind of people that if they had gotten COVID, they might not make it.
And they register themselves.
They
in
are
some-
they are members of Next Village, this nonprofit, and their membership gets them access to volunteers and programs, and even in certain cases, assistance with everything. Perfect example. There are plenty of senior citizens who get a bill in the mail and don't know how to pay it in the digital age. Or there are folks who get a phone call saying, "Oh, hi, I'm with the FBI. I need your social security number, and we're going to clear out your bank account, and you can pay us all in Bitcoin." And which is one of the leading scams that's happening now, and people are getting their life savings drained. Another story for another time. I just saw this call to action. So I started getting involved in that. And then I got a phone call from a gentleman who I'd met a couple months prior when I was working on Neon and trying to launch in North Beach. His name is Danny Sauter. He's currently the District 3 supervisor. He just won his election. Congratulations to him. And Danny was at that time the president of the North Beach Neighbors. And he said, "Hey, I know you're very passionate about small business, and I get the sense you're a get shit done kind of guy. I want to do something to help small businesses. Will you jump on a call with us this week?" I said, "I'd be more than happy to." It was me and him and two other gentlemen. And we essentially put our heads together and we said, well, what if one night next week we pick a restaurant and we get the word out that this restaurant is doing, free delivery, right? You don't have to do DoorDash. You don't have to do Uber Eats. They're going to have a special menu, maybe 8 to 10 items. I mean, this is early pandemic days. Everything was shut down. And when you talk about a community like North Beach traditionally, cash only, no delivery, right? So they had to pivot. They had to come up with something new. So we said, sure. And we picked Piazza Pellegrini on Columbus, corner of Columbus and Powell. And we said, hey, we're going to get you as much business as we can. We're going to email every single person we can find. Let's see how we do. And in 2.5 hours, and we'll deliver the food for free. All you got to do is give us a hot meal at the end of the night, right? We'll sing for our supper. And we do our first week that Thursday night, and we made the guy $2,500 in 2.5 hours. Got him like 40 orders. And then we looked at each other, and we were walking it, and we were biking it. We didn't have a car, right? And we're going all over North Beach taking this food to people, wearing masks, and all this stuff in our, in this crazy time that's happening. And we look at each other and go, so where are we going next week? And you fast forward to 1 year later, we supported over 50 local businesses across Russian Hill, North Beach, and Chinatown. We generate over $250,000 in gross revenue for these businesses. And we worked with some of the leading restaurants in the community. I mean, everything from Soto Mare to Mr. Juice. We made Mr. Juice $7,000 in one night in the peak of the pandemic.
I remember Mr. Juice is, I think, it's still a Michelin one-star restaurant.
Oh, yeah. Brendan
they were
Jew,
making money off of deliveries.
Because he couldn't open, right? And this is even, people were still trying to figure out how they would operate with outdoor dining, right? I mean, there were businesses that just never were built for outdoor dining. And they had to adapt. And people were still nervous in the summer of 2020 of going out. It eventually blossomed where we had, at one point, almost 20 active volunteers who came out every Thursday night. They wanted the socialization. They wanted to meet restaurant owners. They enjoyed getting a hot meal at the end of the night. And they just wanted to get out of their homes. So we did that for a year. We did our last one. The mayor came out. She even did a delivery for us. We got the certificate of honor, which is this fun little piece of paper you get if you do something nice for the city. And that ended in the spring of 2021. I want to say, we did it for about almost a full year. And then I started a few side businesses while kind of waiting for that moment for Neon. I started a telemedicine business with my dad. I was doing some consulting in the bug bounty space. I was doing some work for Intel, big company. I was doing multifamily consulting. I was flying down to LA every single week doing a multifamily work on a multifamily residential business, which is an awful business to be in, I'll tell you that. But I had learned a lot from it. And then in the fall of 2022, I launched a program called the Small Business Boogie. And the Small Business Boogie started, I was inspired by a guy who called me up in the winter of 2021. If people remember, in the winter of 2021, there were all these flash mob robberies happening. So 30 people would run into the Louis Vuitton in Union Square armed to the teeth, and they would just rip everything off. And a guy calls me up and he says, hey, I've got an idea that you should start. I said, what? He said, you should do flash mob buyouts, not robberies. I said, what are you talking about? He's like, bring 50 people to a business and give them 30 minutes to shop till they drop and then go on to the next one. I said, great. When are you going to start this? He said, I'm not starting it. You're going to start it. So in the fall of 2022, we launched the Small Business Bookie. We did it across multiple neighborhoods in conjunction with Manny's, who was doing this thing called All Out San Francisco. And we did our personal first one in Russian Hill. And 30 people came out. We went to the Russian Hill bookstore. We went to Cheese Plus. We went to...
and they had to shop for a certain amount? Or?
30 minutes. Shop till you drop. Each business did a special discount that night. They were, I think Russian Hill bookstore did 50% off on all gift cards, 25% off on select books, but it was only for 30 minutes. So, this only existed for that moment. And then I was all dressed up in, sequins and all that stuff. And I would interview all the business owners before we went inside. So you got to hear the story, and we'd do it to disco too. So, Russian Hill bookstore, Cheese Plus, another local retailer. Then we finished off, and we always finished off at a bar. And we finished off that night at the Bell Tower on Polk Street. And the rule was, if you made it all the way to the last stop, I'd buy your first round. So I always buy the first drink.
Yeah.
So then next month, we did North Beach. And then after that, we did Chinatown. And then we did Fillmore Street. And then we did Clement Street. And then we did, who else am I missing? We did Union Street, which was ironic because then I opened up my business on Union Street. And then once I opened up Neon in the summer, I just didn't have the time. However, this past year, I got commissioned by the San Francisco Public Library, and we brought back the Small Business Boogie for Small Business Week, and we did the Tenderloin, which was amazing. Mayor came out, the supervisor came out. We had 150 people shopping in the Tenderloin and supported 5 amazing businesses. 826 Valencia, which supports kids with after-school programming and reading and writing. The Phoenix Hotel, which is one of the secret gems of the city, which I love, which is an amazing space that does live music.
A little bit of LA vibe to that.
So great. Out of Sight Pizza, which I will say is the best slice of pizza in San Francisco, run by an amazing entrepreneur. And then we finished up at, what was the bar on Hyde Street? Shovels Bar. So that really, and it went so well that the public library said, are we doing one in 2025? So in May of 2025, we're doing Hayes Valley.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll end the segment 1 by talking about your new business. So you opened finally. Neon in
June of 2023. We went summer 2022, I'm walking down Union Street and I see a beautiful space for lease. Like all things, it took way too long. I put in my offer in the fall. It took 3 months of negotiation, and we finally signed the lease in February of 2023. I re-engaged with all my investors in January. We raised a little bit more capital. We didn't need that much. We just got ourselves in a healthy position. And we got our keys on March 1st. 90 days later, June 1st, we opened our doors officially. So it'll be essentially a year and a half at the end of this month that we've been open.
Well, we'll end our segment 1, and we'll come back after a break for segment 2, where we talk about co-working spaces and future work.
Can't wait.
Welcome to the second segment of our conversation with Teddy Kramer today. So, Teddy, you started your own co-working company, Neon, and you're located here on Union Street, I guess?
Yes, in Cow Hollow in San Francisco.
Why co-working?
Yeah, so the thing I noticed since I left WeWork in 2015 was that there was a need for non-membership based workspace. As well as non-membership based event space. I saw it as early as 2013, 2014. People were looking for affordable options, but it really stood out for me more once I moved to the Bay Area and once I really started traveling and seeing people's behaviors all around the world. And for the last 20 years, the coffee shop has turned into a workspace. You can go to any coffee shop in any major city, and there are just people who participate in what I call the unspoken bargain.
Yeah.
And the unspoken bargain is if you buy enough coffee, we'll let you sit here. With that being said,
Or you buy a coffee, then I'll let you
yeah,
sit.
exactly. Or you can buy a coffee, you'll sit here and we'll give you dirty looks for 5 hours until you get up and leave. And you're seeing the coffee shop revolting. Even before the pandemic, coffee shops were really, really getting ticked off about people working in their spaces because it hurts their revenue model. The revenue model of the coffee shop is like any food and beverage facility, turnover, right? They want you sitting down, consuming what you've got, get up and the next person could sit. Because if you and I go to a coffee shop to have a sit down conversation over coffee and we go in and there's nowhere to sit, we're going to leave, right?
But I remember when Starbucks was sort of starting their expansion, they intentionally put these charging points everywhere so people could come, sit for many hours, maybe maybe order a couple of drinks. I'm sure they had a math somewhere on how many drinks people order.
Yeah.
But then I also seen the other side where they don't put charging points on the coffee shops anymore.
They cover them.
They
actually cover their outlets.
So what's a better model for these coffee shops? Huh? I don't
From
know.
a financial perspective, it's unquestionably the latter, right? The business model is sell as much coffee as possible. And if you're dealing with folks who want to be sitting in that coffee shop consuming the coffee, if there's nowhere to sit because someone has just bought, if someone is spending $5 but using your table for 6 hours, you're going to be losing money, right? But if you can get, 10 people to be buying a cup of coffee and rotating out every single 30 minutes, that's the model that you want. I think what there's a lot of factors at play here that pushed me to start this business. Number one for me obviously is the rise of remote work and hybrid work. And people will say, "Oh, the pandemic created this." Remote work was already happening before the pandemic. It wasn't a huge number. It was maybe 5% of the entire US workforce was working remotely, and you had a solid 75% who were working remotely at least 1 day a week. Right? And that can be any kind of flexibility, half days, things like that. But when I first moved to San Francisco in 2015, I saw people, they'd open up Slack on a Friday and you see WFH. And I came from New York. There's no WFH in New York. I said, what's WFH? Oh, it's work from home. I said, oh, you mean they're taking the day off? It's a vacation day. I said, no, they're staying at home and they're working. I said, I don't understand that. I can't comprehend that. You're either in the office and working or you're not. A very old school mentality. But what I started to see is that these people were just as productive. They were getting their work done. And it made sense. If you live in San Jose on Friday and you have a family, you don't want to commute to San Francisco and back when in reality, you can just get your work done and be just fine. And you can spend those other days doing those things. So I started watching these trends in around 2017 and 2018, seeing that every single year, half a point, some years a full point, the number of companies and people were allowing for remote work. And it wasn't just startups. Sure, there were startups. Perfect example was a company, GitLab, big competitor to GitHub, was a fully remote company back in 2016, 2017, and forever has been. No office space. Everyone worked wherever they wanted. And you had companies like Envision, Zapier, whatever you want to call them, who were fully remote companies. Sure, startups, whatever. But then all of a sudden you'd look and say, hey, American Express, Dell, huge corporations, 20, 30% of their workforce, fully remote. Well, there's a trend going on here. Then the second trend I picked up on was what I call the retail apocalypse, right? And what I started to see was that because of the rise of Amazon and e-commerce, one sector, particularly pharmacies, were going through a major, major crisis. Walgreens, CVS, and Rite Aid all overexpanded in the early 2000s and 2010s. They knew that they were making plenty of money selling you drugs and pharmaceuticals, but one thing that they were betting on was that you were going to buy your groceries from them. Right? People would walk into Walgreens, they'd get their medication, and they would buy their chips, and they would buy their toilet paper, they'd buy their shampoo, they'd buy all those things. Well, what happened when Amazon came in? You don't need to buy those things from CVS and Walgreens anymore. And at that time, late 2010s, you started to see a small amount of retail theft. I can't remember the term, but there's a name for the amount of money that they bake into their models that they know they're going to lose from theft and things like that. And obviously, with the pandemic, it just accelerated, right? The other sector of retail where there's going major changes is banking, right? I'm not saying Chase and Wells Fargo are going out of business, but retail banking, you and I going into a retail bank, it's a dying practice, right? The only time you go into a bank is when you need quarters or you got to get cash. And even then, You're seeing banks that are shutting down. They don't offer safety deposit boxes anymore. Everything is becoming digitized. So because of that, you have this huge hole on Main Street. And these aren't small locations, right? These are 10,000 square foot locations on great corners, high visibility, high foot traffic that are just evaporating. They're leaving. And what's going to go there? And that was the thing for me. Well, I see people are repurposing coffee shops. I see that people are working, remotely more and more and more. Companies are adopting this. And there's all these spaces that are becoming available and nobody knows what to do with them. And to me, I couldn't get it out of my head.
So perfect demand and supply sort of.
And the answer was workspace, but not membership-based workspace. That was the other thing, is that it would all be on demand. To me, one of the major trends I've seen in consumer behavior is a push away from membership, right? And, I don't consider spending $10 a month with Spotify membership, right? It's just an on-demand product that you use for unlimited access to music. Same thing for Netflix, even car ownership, right? Things like Zipcar, even Uber has flirted with that, Get Around, Turo. Living in a city like San Francisco, I never have owned a car in this city. But if I do need a car, I can get one at the snap of a finger just by tapping my phone. So we've moved from an access lifestyle versus an ownership lifestyle. Even thinking about homes. I mean, there are people today who are talking about they'd rather rent than own a home. There are people who are actually advocating for that. So it's about access to products, not ownership of products. And to me, co-working, no matter what anyone says, is a very, very long-term commitment.
So what do you think? Co-working is going to be owned by big guys like WeWork, or you think there's room for smaller players like Neon that started?
I think ultimately
the big is going to get bigger in this.
No,
space.
I don't think the big gets bigger. I think we're already seeing immense saturation. I think it's very easy to get started to get a co-working space started, right? All you need is a floor plate, carve up a few offices, and then in the end, you just got to get people to believe that you're the best space. The thing about Neon that's different is, we don't describe ourselves as a co-working space. Neon is a drop-in workspace and a neighborhood event space. We offer the affordability, the flexibility, and the location of the coffee shop with the amenities and functionality of the co-working space. And to dive deep into that, we are on the ground floor in retail. We are not downtown on the 15th floor of an office building where you got to have a key card and check in and have a contract and go through that arduous sales process. Every single co-working space in the world makes you sign a contract. Every single co-working space in the world wants a security deposit, a 30-day notice. They can call it short-term as much as they want. But if you're going to move out of co-working space, you need to know 60 days in advance. When you walk into Neon, all you do is you open up your phone, you tap a button, and you get online immediately. And the best part is unlimited free coffee, tea and water, copying, printing, shipping, but you pay when you need it. And that's been the number one piece of feedback that we've gotten from our customers in the last year and a half, which is that they love the lack of commitment because everything else in their life doesn't require a commitment. Why should workspace feel that way? So from our perspective, I don't even really view co-working as a competitor of ours, because if someone comes in the Neon and says, I need a private office, this isn't the product for you. Not in 2024, maybe in 2026, as we continue to scale and grow, and maybe we do, day offices and things like that in larger spaces. Our biggest competitor is really twofold. Number one, it's the coffee shop, because for 20 years, our mind has said, if I buy the coffee, they'll let me stay here, right? If I buy enough lattes, maybe I can hang out in here. So we're fighting against that behavior. And the second competitor to us is staying at home.
Yeah.
And that's actually the third problem we're solving. The Surgeon General of the United States of America said 1 in 2 people in this country is lonely. So what we try and say to folks is just coming into Neon for 2 hours a day, $10, as much coffee as you want, will help you fight against loneliness. Just being around like-minded people, getting out of your pajamas, getting out of your apartment or your home, and just being around other people working, you'll be more productive and you will definitely feel better about yourself, because if you just stay in the same place all day, it's basic, psychology. You're not going to feel good about yourself.
I had a question about coffee shops. There are people working, of course, they're knowledge workers doing Excel or PowerPoint or whatever, but some take meetings too.
Yep.
But I've seen recently that these coffee shops crank up their background music.
Yep.
Is that to deter people from taking calls, or is it just a mood setting?
So there's been a lot of There's been, I'll call it a revolt against the remote worker in the coffee shop. And it's been a lot of different ways that they do it. Number one, we already talked about, they're removing power. So you can't charge your computer. If you don't have the battery, good luck. Number two, some of them don't offer internet. Sightglass Coffee, one of the best cups of coffee in the city, does not offer internet in their space. There are coffee shops like St. Frank on Polk Street, turn off the internet on weekends. And then last but not least, they crank up the volume. There are even coffee shops that literally will put a giant sign on their window, no laptops allowed. They do not want you there. That's great for my business, right? And I'm just a big believer that give the customer what they want. They're not sitting in the coffee shop because it's a great place to work. They're sitting in the coffee
You
shop.
don't have other options.
It's the only place to work. Because when they walk into WeWork and they say, and I meet a lot of people who do things like the all access pass in WeWork, half of them are hacking it. Right? Half of them are signing up with multiple email addresses, getting a discount code. Nobody wants to pay $350 a month to work downtown. They either get their company to subsidize it, or they figure out a way to hack the system, which a lot of them do. What the reason that they love what they can do at Neon is they can just get to work with the tap of a button. Everything else has been digitized in our lives, right?
So since we're talking about co-working, future of work, what do you think is a future of work? In person, hybrid, or remote?
I think the answer is hybrid.
For knowledge workers.
Yeah.
I mean, because, somebody still needs to, do that construction job. So that's not going to go
Absolutely.
remote, but,
I think it's a larger holistic thing. Unquestionably, the answer to me is hybrid, right? I think I've done full-time work from home. I hated it. I'm a very extroverted person. I love to be around people. I get my energy from other people. I also like to have my alone time too. I love sitting at home in the morning, right when I wake up, have my coffee, take the dog for a walk, and plug in 3 hours. I answer my emails, I set my agenda for the day, and I rock and roll. But I love coming into the space and engaging with people and talking with them. My wife, who hopefully will be on the show eventually, is an attorney for a national law firm. And before the pandemic, full-time, 5 days a week. The entire company has shifted. She's only in the office 2 to 3 days a week. The biggest companies in the world see the value of hybrid, right? Their employees are craving it. I think Amazon and companies that are saying, hey,
come back.
We want a full
or the
return to
Doge
office.
and the new administration is asking federal workers to potentially come back.
And I think it's the Doge thing is a whole other topic in terms of what they're doing. I think it's a way to trim fat and to get people to quit. And that might be Amazon's strategy too, is that they're saying, hey, we need to trim fat. We would rather have you voluntarily leave than you forcing us to do it.
They don't have to pay severance, I believe, right? If they do that, yeah.
Exactly. I think, because here's what I think is going to happen. If a company says you need to be in the office 5 days a week, that employee is going to say, I'm going to go find a company that's not going to make me do that. And there's more companies out there that are saying, do what you want, rather than saying you got to do what we tell you to do. And the return to office thing tried to happen in 2022. It failed. It tried to happen in 2023. It failed. It's going to fail in 2024. The people at Amazon, they get paid all day to think about this problem. Again, I don't think it's because they are that committed to full return to office. I think they're trying to trim some fat and clean up.
But do you think if hybrid is sort of the answer, or if some people say remote is the answer, do you still think that physical spaces are necessary for innovation and inspiration and people doing creative brainstorming work?
I think it's crucial. I think in-person collaboration is crucial.
Because we live in Silicon Valley and where ideas run the economy, and for new ideation and brainstorming, and how much of that is possible through remote work versus hybrid or in person. I mean, that's the argument people are making. Hey, you go talk to the coworker right next to you, and then you have an impromptu conversation and draw on the whiteboard, and then come up with a new product or something.
I completely believe in that. I just don't think it's needed 5 days a week, because I don't think that quote unquote.
Because you're not doing that 5 days in a week. You're probably doing that once or twice in a week.
Correct.
Probably.
I also think, I had a very interesting conversation. When I was at HackerOne, we had an office in the Netherlands, and I had a Dutch employee say to me, he's like, I don't understand your Americans' work culture. I said, what do you mean? He says, in America, you learn to work with each other and then you become friends. I said, okay. He said, but over here we become friends and then we learn to work with each other. And I think for us in the American workforce, part of the importance of interpersonal interaction in the workplace will make hybrid work successful. right? If you and I have a good relationship in person, and that doesn't always come from just jamming on the whiteboard, coming up with an idea. Sometimes it's just having a meal together.
Yeah.
Sometimes just saying hi to each other in the morning, have a cup of coffee, and shooting the shit about what did you do this weekend, or maybe we have something in common. Yeah, it's small talk, right? And that's actually things I've read about. Is like water cooler talk is really, really important to collaboration. So that on Friday when you're at home and I'm at home and we're on a Zoom, that it's not like, ugh, I don't want to talk to this person. It's like, oh, we know each other.
Yeah.
We have some interaction. That will make hybrid work more successful. So I think the importance of in-person is less about like, hey, we're going to only be able to come up with that great idea
Yeah.
in the conference room on the whiteboard. No. It's just about the fact that we're going to actually build a relationship, because all relationship building is interpersonal.
Yeah.
It will therefore make the hybrid experience more successful. One of the things I've seen, that company I mentioned earlier, GitLab, they would do 4 events a year, one every single quarter, and they would fly everybody to a single destination around the world. And they weren't doing planning. They weren't doing, crazy strategy. They were just hanging out.
Yeah.
And that
Hangout is important. Yeah.
exactly.
Build trust.
My CEO at HackerOne, Martin Mikos, one thing I really, really valued about him was the importance of having a meal together as a team. Having that communal moment, just eating something together, having a drink, alcoholic or non-alcoholic, will make you work better together.
That was my organization at Uber. We hired people all over the world: India, Europe, Brazil, India, Mexico, and I intentionally hired people everywhere because we wanted to go where the best talent was. But we also said, hey, we gotta meet for a week, ideally in a quota.
Yeah.
Budgets and all that. Okay, at least 2 times a year, or at least once a year.
Yeah.
Where we come, we have now these team of 50, 60 people. But for that 1 week, we are just building the team and just talking to each other. And then we go on our own way, and we have now the mojo to build for a quota.
And that's the perfect word. It's about mojo. And it's about building.
You don't need to hang out every day, but you need to hang out sometimes.
And that's exactly how Neon is being used, right? I have people, I've had some people say it's like, oh, you got to force community, right? And that's a word I really try to avoid. We don't really use the word community. I like to use the word neighborhood.
Yeah.
Neighborhoods to me function organically. Community can be forced. And it's, I'm sure we'll get into the conversation, but I see a lot of ideas popping up around San Francisco and in other major cities that I don't think have long-term they're not going to stick around for a long time. Friendship clubs, things that are kind of make promises to consumers like you and me that can't be kept, right? If you said to me, I'm going to pay you $250 a month and you're going to make me all my friends, I think that's a really, really hard thing to deliver on.
And that's like a dating app, huh?
But at least in dating, right? Matchmakers have existed for a long time. But dating, I think, is an easier solution than friendship, right? Because usually friendship to me is a simple thing. You bond over, similar interests, right? So, if I'm into video games, I'm going to go play video games and meet people I like. If I'm into music, I'm going to go engage in music. But to tell me, but that happens on my time and what I want to do. And sure, there are people who have trouble taking a leap and maybe they need a little bit of help. But if you're going to say, pay me, the value is that I'm going to make these connections for you and build your community for you, especially as an adult. I think it's a really...
I would love to see the results of that, outcomes of that friendship club. Huh?
But what I see happening at Neon is it's happening organically, right? People are connecting with each other in Neon, not because I'm grabbing them and saying, hey, the two of you need to meet. And sometimes I see that natural connection and I'll introduce people. But just having the physical space allows for the opportunity.
But how much of that, let's say, based on your example at Neon or other places, is people wanting to have a community, or like, hey, I just need a place to work, and where I'm not in the corner of my apartment room. Like, what percentage of people are like, hey, I just want to do my 9 to 4 or 9 to 5?
It's probably 70-30. I'm just here to work, whatever. But then there's 30% of the people like, I'm looking to connect with folks. And we curate events and we curate opportunities for folks to host their own events to do those things. I mean, even recently, I had a mom who came in. We hosted a 7-year-old birthday party. We do every kind of event under the sun, social things, corporate things, everything in between. She came in for a 7-year-old birthday party. And she said, would you ever do a corporate offsite? We just booked our 7th offsite with them for January because it's become her now space. And she's the CMO of a big company. This is her space now. This is the place, and her team loves it because they don't want to be downtown in San Francisco. They like that they get to stay in the marina, that they get to be on a great street like Union Street with boutiques and great restaurants and great drinks and food. And they also like to be taken care of. And that's the thing that I think we really, really do well at Neon is we're a hospitality business, right? We're not co-working, right? We're not rent arbitrage. We're retail, right? The dirtiest word in co-working is churn. Right? When someone leaves your co-working space and cancels their membership, they're never coming back. They're churned forever. They're not leaving for any, unless something, happened financially and they just can't afford it, which is not often. It's more they don't like what the service that they're getting. The thing that's so amazing about Neon, because it's so affordable, because it's so on demand, I want a churn. It's no different than a restaurant. I want someone sitting in my space, sitting there for 2 hours, giving me $10, having a cup of coffee that cost me 7 cents to make them, right? Leaving, and then the next person comes in and takes that seat. So I can monetize that seat as many times as possible in a day. And then ultimately that person who leaves says, wow, I got so much done for just $10 in this great space. I'm in my neighborhood. I can go to my class and go to my thing. I don't have to get on a bus. I don't have to figure out how to get home or get in an Uber or worry about what's coming next. I'm already where I live.
Yeah.
And our ultimate vision, which we're going full 100, foot on the gas, 100 miles an hour in 2025 is to bring more of them to other neighborhoods. I was just looking at a map the other day, and one of the areas of the city we're really hot on is the West Side. If you look west of Divisadero in San Francisco, that's almost the center of San Francisco. How many co-working spaces are west of Divisadero in San Francisco?
Not much. Because I live on the west side of the city, and I had to come all the way on the other side.
The answer is zero. There's not one co-working space. So what do you have? You have
coffee shops,
right? And everyone has their coffee shop where they let me work for a while and I know the people and I give them a tip and they let me hang out there, but I can't take calls there because it's a little too loud and the bathroom's not clean and I have to go outside in the street to make a call. And again,
it's a smart proposition,
And it's just, and the thing for me, and I talk about this with, I'm sure you talk to a ton of entrepreneurs who want advice and things, and it's such a 101 thing, but you got to solve a problem, right? And for me, and I still see it, like when I leave, I will walk through North Beach and I'll look at all the coffee shops, right? And I will just see how many people are working just to make sure my thesis is still on. And, every coffee shop continues to reinforce it, that I am still on to something and we are still have a great solution, but you have to solve a problem, right?
And you're, especially people on the west side of the San Francisco, if they work in the Peninsula or South Bay or in the downtown, they don't like getting on to the highway because it takes a long time for them to get on a 101 or 280.
Absolutely.
So they probably work from home. And if they give them an option, it's a good opportunity. One thing I heard recently about sort of the companies like Spotify saying, hey, just go remote versus coming in person is after, I don't know how true this is, but I heard there was a secret meeting at the White House with bunch of CEOs of companies basically urging these CEOs to consider not doing fully remote work because they wanted the main street to open after pandemic. And right after, I don't know the date, and most CEOs were coming out and announcing, oh no, we're either hybrid or back to fully do work.
RTO.
So what happens when, if you go fully remote, what happens to the main street? Restaurants and coffee shops and all that probably closes down, I'm guessing.
Well, I would actually counter it. I would say actually Main Street thrives
when people are fully remote.
Well, I mean, because
especially in downtown areas where the offices are.
Well, that's different. The downtown area,
or like wherever the former offices were, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yes. So that ultimate. Yes. So because I think San Francisco is a unique city. So I could talk, I'll kind of come up with two examples, like New York. We'll talk about like New York and San Francisco, which are two good examples. The downtown of San Francisco, if everyone went fully remote, downtown would be destroyed,
done,
right? But the neighborhoods, the Marina, Clement Street, Divisadero, Hayes Valley, thrive, right? Those main streets or high streets, they will just explode with activity because no matter what we do, people will not stay inside, right? Unless we force them to, which we did. But once we're allowed to go out, they will look for places. And again, they will repurpose spaces. That's another thing that I'm really interested in this kind of new age, in a post-pandemic world, is how does retail evolve, right? And that's a big thing. When you look at a downtown San Francisco has to evolve, and we're doing it slowly but surely. If we're going to say, oh, downtown San Francisco is only for work, then it's dead, right? No matter what happens with return to office. What has to happen in downtown San Francisco is it has to become mixed use, just like retail has to now become mixed use. Neon is not just a workspace, it's also an event space, it's a community space. I mean, we do everything under the sun, from dog training to birthday parties to baby showers to weddings to corporate offsites to our own events. We're interviewing politicians, local journalists, restaurateurs, entrepreneurs. We've hosted podcasts in the space. So to me, it's about how do you make your space multifunctional? How do you make your neighborhood multifunctional? And for downtown San Francisco, right, it can be a place where people work, but it has to be a place where people go out to listen to music, where people go out to eat, where you can shut down the block and host a giant party. And they're doing more of those things. And one of the big things that they want to do is try and make it more residential, which, hey, if it's affordable, you can do it. There has to be a draw. You have to give people a reason.
Make it greenify it a little bit, and then make
absolutely.
events.
And then if you compare it to a place like New York, which is insanely dense, communities like the Upper East Side, the Upper West Side, Chelsea, Greenwich Village, those communities thrived or will thrive in a full, remote, world. Because
probably not Wall Street, but
and amazingly, there is more residential downtown in the financial district of New York City than you would think. But I agree. I always used to joke that you go to the FiDi and Wall Street in New York City on a weekend and it's a ghost town.
Yeah, it's a ghost town. Except for tourists on the Bull Statue.
who want to go see those things. So I think the writing is already on the wall for downtown San Francisco, and they're already making that move, anticipating that hybrid work is here to stay, and therefore it has to change.
What do people, when they come into hybrid work, other than the flexibility of working by hour or by the day, what do they actually care about in a workspace if they're working 9 to 5?
Yeah, great question. I think the first and foremost, it's got to be
What do you hear
easy.
from people?
Oh, I mean, I think it's the basics, right? They want fast internet, right? I mean, and
That's like running water. You need fast internet.
But the funny
now.
thing is, yes, it is like running water. You'd be so amazed, and I don't mean co-working spaces. Every co-working space has got great internet, but you'd be so amazed at what people will accept when they go into a coffee shop. And I won't name the coffee shop, but there was a coffee shop in Hayes Valley I went to. I was touring a space. I had an hour to kill. You end up in a coffee shop, and I participated in the unspoken bargain. I bought my croissant. I got my cup of coffee, and I go to sit down. Asked for the Wi-Fi password. They gave it to me. I go to log on. My computer can't connect. I'm very tech savvy. There's nothing wrong with my thing. I've got the right password. It just can't connect to the network. There's a young lady sitting next to me. I tap her on the shoulder. Hi, do you work here often? I work here almost every single day. Do you ever have trouble connecting to the internet? Every single day I have trouble connecting to the internet. So
it's
I was
a
looking
feature,
for
not a bug. Huh?
Exactly. I mean, it's probably a little bit of both. And I just sat there and I'm like, you go into a Starbucks, you're running on a residential line. And I do speed tests at every single one of those spaces. Starbucks is running on like 2 megabits up and 2 megabits down. There's no way you're going to handle a successful Zoom call. There's no way you can do serious work if you're a true knowledge worker trying to get stuff done. So the first and most important thing is you got to have fast internet. Number 2, you have to have a clean bathroom and a beautifully pristine bathroom. If you're going to ask someone to sit in your space for 7 to 8 hours in a day, you have to give them a clean and sanitary facility that also is thinking about them. So, for our bathroom, we don't do paper towels, we don't do hand dress, we do physical hand towels that get washed every single night by a cleaning company. We have lotions, we've got, feminine hygiene products. We have, we don't use sandpaper toilet paper, we use like the highest end double quilted toilet. I mean, those are things that matter to people. And then to me, if you're gonna say to folks, you're paying for the space, but you're gonna get free coffee, you have to have a great cup of coffee. So we use locally sourced, small businesses. We work with, we're just actually switching over to Ritual Coffee. We started out with Sight Glass. We had a great run with them. We're now moving over to Ritual, women-owned business that we love. And we're going to be working with Ritual. But it's not just about the cup of coffee. oat milk, almond milk, half and half. We do a lavender syrup that my wife makes from scratch. 4 kinds of tea, iced coffee for people, all of those little things. And then you also have to listen to your customers too. We started out in 2023 just offering that. And then people came to us and said, you know what, it would be great if you sold some drinks. So we got a refrigerator. Now we sell San Pellegrinos, Celsius, canned coffee drinks, all of those things. And it's not hard. You just continue to adapt and hear what people say. But another thing that I think is really important for us is what's happening outside our doors too, right? There's a lot of co-working spaces and a lot of what these membership clubs that they make a crucial mistake. And part of the crucial mistake is they run a food and beverage operation. They put in a full-on restaurant. And because they're now participating in a really, really, really difficult business model, then they say, you can't bring anything in. And our approach is completely the opposite. I want you to leave your things with me, go out into the neighborhood and go support a small business. We don't do cappuccinos. We don't do lattes. We don't do matcha. We don't do, breakfast burritos or anything like that. I want you to go and support a local business. And when someone says to me, where should I go for a latte? I give them my favorite spots. Go to Gio Gelato, go to Italian Homemade, or go to Epicurean Trader. Where should I go for a sandwich? Go check out Luke's Local. Where should I go for a breakfast burrito? Go to Mama's Luncheonette. That makes us a true partner of the neighborhood, as opposed
You're not
to
competing with those people.
We're partners with them, right? And if someone would, because again, my competition on my block is Starbucks, right? Because that's where people are going to work. But I see what I call membership clubs in the city who think that
they have their own menus, and I've seen some of them actually.
One of them I know, it's in the Ferry Building. The Ferry Building to me is one of the culinary meccas of San Francisco. I couldn't imagine going downstairs, getting a great cup of coffee or something for lunch, going upstairs to my workspace, and them saying, you can't bring in that sandwich that you just bought downstairs. What? Why can't I do that? Because we've decided to operate in a terrible business model called food and beverage, and you need to participate in it for us to pay the rent. Yeah. And to me, that's not hospitality. That's almost like blackmail, right? Mm-hmm. So now I have to buy your $10 latte when I could have gotten a better one downstairs. I have to buy your sandwich, which may not be as good. And that to me is just, I don't know. I don't think it's collaborative, and I don't think it's smart business.
Yeah.
So that's something, and I get so many folks say, you should do sandwiches, you should do lattes. Never. We will never ever do
There's
that.
a whole can of worms, the restaurant business as well.
And not only that, it's a regulatory hurdle. Then all of a sudden the Department of Health is down your back.
Is your kitchen clean?
Exactly. And all
another reason to shut you down.
And all it takes is one customer who has one bad experience, and now you're in a business that isn't your thing. And for me, I want my staff focusing on the customer and their experience rather than making sure that there's a teddy bear in their latte foam.
One comment about internet, like somebody said, these days, internet work at home or at workspace is like oxygen.
Yeah.
We don't think about it until we don't have.
I'd say 10% of our customers are coming in because their internet has gone out or their internet is too slow.
Yeah.
I get probably one call a week of someone in a very, very demanding professional field, a videographer, a music producer.
How's your
who has
internet here?
terabits. Well, and the thing is, they don't believe you, right? Because they're used to bad internet, right? And some of them will give you the technical quiz. Tell me about your internet. Can I ping your IP? All these things, and you show it to them. They go, wow, you weren't lying, and it's great to deliver.
So I've worked for Uber for 7-8 years, but I have one thing which is on the rise as well as the gig work, where people are working for 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day, driving or doing other stuff, TaskRabbit and things like that. And apparently there are a lot of co-working or working spaces that's emerging to cater to these gig workers, where they can go hang out, meet other people, have a cup of coffee, and then share stuff. Have you seen some of that? It's something in the long term.
It's something in the long term I really would love to cater to. I would love to figure out a way to partner with the ride sharing companies and saying, hey, you have a hub for your drivers now. The challenge we have on Union Street, lack of parking. Right. And if I could get a location that had its own dedicated parking lot where I could have, I'm not saying I would reserve a parking space, but where I could say, hey, when you're not driving, you need to get a break, have a cup of coffee, use a clean bathroom, we can be your space. And then, you figure out a way to either have the Ubers of this world subsidize it, or you give them a special discount code. You're a driver, 50% off because you do that. But that's that. And it's a very weird trend. You see gig workers, particularly Uber drivers and folks who are doing DoorDash, they never have anywhere to use the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And there's I hate to be hyperbolic, but there's an epidemic of filled up water bottles, urine-filled water bottles around the city because they have nowhere to go. So they just use a water bottle and they put it on the side of the street. And I mean, I'll tell you, like all our vendors, UPS, USPS, Amazon, anytime they deliver, I offer them a cup of coffee and I let them use my bathroom. And I would love to figure out a way to scale that to people who aren't directly serving us as a vendor and just saying, hey, we can be a place for you.
Yeah, and just one more thing in terms of location. I know real estate motto is location, location, location.
Always.
But in this whole co-working sort of economy, how important is location, and what kind of location do
It's everything.
should people pick? Huh?
I think if you're getting, a lot of it depends.
Or is it the closest neighborhood location is the best location?
I mean, for us, it was, the data's out there, right? All you need to do, and, I pulled very simply from the 2020 census, and it's not perfect data, but it still gives you enough. And what I was looking for was I wanted to be in a community that had, we'll say, a young enough demographic where you're going to find people who are working in tech or working in jobs that are at least open to hybrid work. I wanted to be in a community that had folks who were, had a bachelor's degree or higher, which we were able to find. And you have to find people who have disposable income, who can pay. I mean, because listen, are we a, what was the term in the pandemic? A necessary service? What was it called?
Essential service.
Essential service. Yeah. Probably not.
Yeah.
Right. I would love to get there. But I think we are definitely a product that people who can afford it will use it. I still think we're I mean, for just $5 you can work and you get a great cup of coffee as much as you want. But at the same time, like there are other options that are free. Right. So you got to do your homework on where you're going to be. And I know a person who started almost an exactly similar business model, and he launched it in Berkeley, and he did it on a main drag that had tons of street traffic, car traffic, but didn't have a lot of foot traffic. And he said to me, once he closed down the location, he said, I realized.
Wish it was more foot traffic.
I picked a bad location.
Yeah.
I picked a bad location.
You'd be surprised. I would do a counter argument on this. I know picking location with young, workers, young professionals.
Yeah.
But I'll be surprised at a lot of times how parents who are working have told me that they want to get away from their kids.
I have a lot of working parents. Yeah.
And you'll be surprised at how many of those demographics you could potentially hit as well if you go to a more suburban sort of location.
And that's why I'm so hot on the west side of San Francisco. And I think everything you're saying is I will say you're right. Without trashing Gen Z, they can be fickle consumers, right? And we don't, we do organic content on social media, but we're not dumping money into, I'm not trying to push out 30 posts a month. We do a great event, we post about it. But I'm not looking to burn cash with digital ads at the moment. But you're 100% right in that demographic of the working parent who cannot be at home with the entire family and has to get away. It's a huge market for us.
And that was a huge, especially during pandemic. But now that kids have gone back to school and all that, maybe it's slightly different.
But you'd be surprised. Even then, I got to get away from home.
Yeah, so change the scenery in the morning. I'll end this segment by asking, what's your advice for people in this field thinking about future of work? There are a lot of CEOs, CXOs that are, I'm not talking about the Fortune 100 companies, but the rest, Fortune 5,000. What should they think about with respect to future of work?
Yeah. I would frame it this way. Listen to your employees and what they need. Sometimes I find that executives are so high up in the clouds, they can't see down to the base of the mountain. And what it's pretty easy when you have two executive assistants and people doing everything for you. But when you are in the trenches and you need to commute an hour and a half each way to come into the office, and you're going to say to somebody, I want you in here 5 days a week, you might lose that talent. And therefore to listen to your employees and really figure out what are they getting from that in-person thing. It's the thing that you and I said, if you're just going to be here 2 to 3 days a week, And it's all about you building relationships with your fellow colleagues so that in the long term, you have strong relationships and you can be more efficient and more effective, then it's a value. But if you're going to return the office and say, I want you here 5 days a week because I said so, you're about to lose a lot of talent. Because that is the one thing I see more and more of is really talented people. And where we live, it's engineering talent, it's product talent who say, there's someone right behind you who's willing to take me.
Yeah.
And they're not going to force me to come in 5 days a week. And I love to use my wife's job as an example. If a national law firm doing work for some of the biggest corporations in the world can do it, working in office only 2 to 3 days a week, your company can do it too. You just have to change your culture, right? And listen, we've always adapted to new tools and behaviors. I mean, I remember back in 2015 when Slack was, we were using HipChat, from Atlassian.
People are using
right?
faxes. Now they're doing emails. Right?
Exactly.
So
We have to change behavior, adapt to technology, and also realize that, I hosted this massive tech company, their executive leadership team meeting. The entire team was distributed. This is a company that's doing close to $1 billion in revenue a year. And they've got people across Europe, people across the United States. They came together, they did their strategy planning, they ate meals together, go execute, right? And you don't make $1 billion a year
without somebody pulling
luck.
their weight, even though they're remote, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But I think, again, if you're an entrepreneur, but the thing I will say is if you're going to say, we're a business, we're fully remote, we're going to do it all through Zoom, you better make sure you socialize. You better make sure you come together. It doesn't have to be all strategy, doesn't have to be all work. You have to do interpersonal stuff. People don't, I just ascribe to that, component of the American workforce.
Yeah.
We work better together if we get to know each other a little bit better. If I worked for a company, I did all my onboarding online and just completely worked online. That's actually happened to me with a consulting gig that I did for a big company. I never got to meet anybody in person. It was partially due to the pandemic. I did good work, but I know I could have done better work if I had had some personal relationships. And it's just one of the limitations of it.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we'll end this second segment. We'll come back after a break for the third segment.
Great.
Welcome to the third segment of our conversation with Teddy Kramer. So, Teddy, we live in San Francisco.
You sure
City
do.
we sort of love and maybe hate sometimes.
Well, there's a famous line from the last black man in San Francisco. You can't hate it if you don't love it.
Exactly. It's two sides of the same coin. It's a good place to live, but not good place to start the business. Would that be an accurate representation of your experience in San Francisco? Or?
I would say you need thick skin to start a business in San Francisco. And by the business I particularly mean is, if you're opening a physical space, brick and mortar of any sense, doesn't matter. It's food and beverage, a recording studio. You have to be willing to
wait and have a lot of money.
I will actually say the money isn't the biggest thing. It's patience, it's ingenuity, and really just, unfortunately, it's a city that if you follow the rules, you're probably going to hit a logjam. You got to sometimes learn how to bend the rules. And I'm not saying break. You didn't hear that from me. But you sometimes got to figure out how to make the rules work in your favor. And Neon is a perfect example, right? There's no use in the planning code for a ground floor workspace, right? So we had to find that needle to thread. And for us, we found that we would just call ourselves retail sales and services. We're no different than a FedEx office, right?
Yeah.
We offer all the same services they offer.
From, let's say, day one being, hey, you expressed interest to the city in starting a business, to when you actually open door, how long did it take you?
If you want to go on the full timeline, 5 years. But really, in terms of, let's say, from the moment I signed my lease in my space, 90 days. But that came through a lot of know-how and a lot of things, knowing, that if I didn't do X, Y, and Z, it probably would add 30 to 60, 90 days. So a perfect example is change of use, right? I took over, our space on Union Street used to be a North Face. North Face is retail sales and service. Neon is retail sales and service. That's not a change of use. That means I can go in, build it out, go and do whatever I need to do, open up. However, if I had taken over a previous restaurant that fell under restaurant or limited restaurant. Then I had to go through a change of use. In some neighborhoods in San Francisco, that has to go through conditional use, meaning that I need to get approval from the neighborhood. That can be a 365-day delay.
Yeah.
And during that 365 days, you're paying rent.
Yeah.
And the average business owner, as you can imagine,
Don't have the cash flow for 365
forget the
days.
cash flow, doesn't even know that it's happening to them. So they sign their lease, they think they can walk in the door and convert that, old North Face into an ice cream shop or into a coffee shop or a pizza place, and they're stuck.
Yeah.
And they get to the planning desk and they go, "Hi, I'm here to open my pizza place." And they go, "Oh, I got 50 more pages of paper for you to deal with." And then you get caught up in the bureaucracy and what I would call the legalized corruption that is getting something open in the city. Permit expediters, neighborhood groups.
You've got to use consultants for these kind of stuff.
And all of these things cost money,
mafia.
right? And it is. And the thing is, there are so many great people in this city who work for the city who want you to get your doors open. The problem is they have been unfortunately affected by, I'll say, politicians over the last 20 years who, to call a spade, are just anti-business. And they like to have their thumb on the scale. They want to pick winners and losers. And if you either haven't kissed the ring or you aren't a known enough commodity in the neighborhood, they'll shut you down. And I see it happen all the time. And I was one of those people.
Yeah, and I would love to hear your experience. I heard this from somebody as well who was a business owner who converted, I think, an ice cream shop to like a franchise after-school math program business.
Yep.
And
Formula
it was
retail.
a 6 to 12 month conditional use approval. And then it goes into a franchise tax board, franchise sum board that again takes 6 to 12
It's
months.
the formula retail.
Formula retail.
Yeah.
So they start paying rent on day one. Yep. And to even get somebody in the door with the ADA approval and everything,
2
it was
years.
at least 2 years.
To open,
So unless you
a
had-
facility for kids.
Unless, average rent of, I don't know, $6,000, let's say, a month
that's cheap.
minimum.
Yeah.
Or like $10,000.
Yeah, call it 10 grand.
Let's say you got to have $250,000 in the bank
Awesome.
just to pay rent for the city to do their job.
And you're paying rent to do nothing. That's the thing. You
Yeah.
can't do anything.
You can't do anything.
You can't build. You can't do anything.
Get somebody in the door as well. So that's, I was looking at when I went to business school, places to start a business. Apparently, Singapore, to get a business license, you can get it in 24 hours.
Oh, I mean, go forget leaving the United States. Go to Texas. If you went to Texas in a city like Austin, Houston, Dallas, doesn't matter, and you said, "I want to open up a facility to help kids with after-school programs," go. Got a lease? Go. Have a good time. Do whatever you
Do you
need.
think is that why a lot of the businesses are moving to Texas? I mean, the big companies.
Yeah, I mean,
Elon Musk
it's
moved
natural that if you're going to be giving a better opportunity to succeed, you're going to take that opportunity. A lot of my trial and error in San Francisco was a blessing because I never got to open my space. The pandemic was a
It's a gift in disguise. Yeah.
Exactly. I learned really, really quickly how the city worked. So I had years to study the planning code, to understand how I was going to position Yan, to know what kind of spaces I was going to look for. I had a lot of.
So what happened with your business when you were
So when I first started in 2019, I was looking for a lot of spaces, and I was learning on the fly. Then I went into North Beach, and there was this beautiful 12,000 square foot space. It's a former Citibank. It's been empty for a decade. And I went to the landlord, and I spent time and money on it, looking at the space. Worked with an architect, did what's called the test fit, where it's a very loose drawing, but kind of showing, kind of what they call the God's eye view from the top down, what it would look like across floors. Beautiful space, everything developed, and I submitted what's called an LOI, a letter of intent. It's non-binding, but it sets out the basic terms of the lease, how long it's going to be, cost per square foot, what the landlord's going to do, what you're going to do, so on and so forth. Usually 2 to 3 pages. Signed. Good to go. I still have the document to this day. The word got around the neighborhood, and I'd lived in San Francisco for, call it, almost 5 years. I lived here, but I didn't really know how it worked. And all of a sudden, the word around the neighborhood was, "Oh, that space is in lease negotiation." Chatter. And someone sends me an email and says, "Hey, we would love to help you. We would love to set up a meeting with Supervisor Aaron Peskin." Supervisor Peskin has been on the Board of Supervisors for over 20 years, and he is definitely a power player in the city. And I'm like, wow, this is going to be great. He's going to love me, you know? I've got this great community space. It's going to really help out North Beach. This is going to just be a fantastic meeting. I reach out to a friend who knows the supervisor, and I tell him, I've got this meeting. And he hints, and he's like, be careful. That's all. Be careful. You don't know what's going to happen. Be careful. What's the big deal? What could happen? And I'll never forget it. It's December 16th of 2019. I go to City Hall, button-down shirt, nice slacks, nice shoes. You know, I'm a business person. I want to look presentable. And I get in there. I've got maybe a half an hour, and I bring, a presentation, and I'm not asking for anything. I just want to explain what my business is. I want to talk about what we're doing and why we're going to be a valuable member of the community, and what can I do to be a good member of North Beach? And he says, it's not up to me. It's up to the neighborhood. And he pontificates like he always does about the planning code and all the things that have happened in his history and what's gone on and blah, 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 blah. And we never really get to any kind of substantial conversation. And, 30 minutes goes by and I go, all right, guess it went well. I asked him one thing. Would he introduce me to the Telegraph Hill Dwellers, which is a leading neighborhood group in North Beach, of which he used to be the president, of which his wife has been involved on the board for almost 2 decades. And he lied to my face and said, I'm not really involved with them anymore. And, little did I know he writes a column in their newspaper every single quarter. So he had no problem lying to my face. And I went to the Castro Theater to see a movie that night. And right before the movie started, I got a phone call from my broker. And he said, Teddy, I'm really sorry, but the deal is dead. And I said, the deal is dead? What happened? He said, well, on the record, the community doesn't want you in your business. They don't like it. And I said, but I haven't even...
That bank has been unoccupied for what, 10 years?
10 years at the time. It's now occupied by Luke's Local, a great
why
business.
Why didn't they want new business to?
Well, no, you have to remember, I never even spoke to any of the members of the community. It's a larger issue with business in the city that I'll talk about in a second. Let me just finish the story. So he said, on the record, the community doesn't want your business. They're really, really against it. That's on the record. Off the record, Peskin torched you. He told the landlord they would crush you in conditional use and you would never get the space open. And I had presented myself, in hindsight, terribly. My deck had a WeWork logo and a HackerOne logo. I was a tech guy, one of these evil tech guys who lives in San Francisco and destroys the neighborhood. And I never had a chance, right? And I'm telling you, the instant after this happened, I was ready to leave. I was ready to move out. I'm done in San Francisco. And I was very fortunate that a week later, I'm riding my bike down Polk Street and I saw the spot that I almost leased and, I got my energy back and I got excited. But I couldn't believe it.
Why do you think they did that? Or why do you think it happened?
It happened because nobody knew me. I wasn't a known commodity. And what I learned is because that was 2019, pre-pandemic. After I did all the work I did in North Beach, throughout the community, those same people who either went to him or talked to the business association said, hey, you're a good guy. And that's the problem. The ultimate problem.
So you need some reputation or credibility in the community.
But the problem is you should never need that, right? Sure, it doesn't hurt to have those things, but it should never be a requirement. You shouldn't have to prove yourself to open your business. All you need is a checking account, a lease, and a dream. That's it. Right? If you can pay your rent and get your doors open, that's all that matters. In the end, the consumer will decide if you belong in the neighborhood or not.
Yeah. But who are they trying to protect? Are they trying to protect the workers or are they trying to protect the quaint nature of their neighborhood?
They would say the quaint nature of their neighborhood. They think what they would have said about my business back then is it's a private members only club, which we know is not the case. It will only serve affluent tech people, and we don't want those people in North Beach. However, they're the ones who go to all the restaurants and buy things from the stores. And this is not just North Beach. There are tons of communities like that. And when I went to open up on Union Street, I wasn't going to make the same mistake. I reached out to every single neighborhood group. I reached out to the supervisor. Now, again, I did those things because, I had been impacted. I had gone through this process. I saw what could happen to me. And I've built relationships over the last 5 years with people across San Francisco. But that shouldn't be a requirement. It shouldn't be necessary. And we can't.
We make it harder for America was built on enterprising people doing enterprising things.
But most importantly, San Francisco can't afford to be turning away entrepreneurship. This is the city where Levi's and Gap and some of the most historic and world-changing technology companies were formed and that are still being formed to this day. And if the response is we got to approve. And really it's tied to the political landscape here, right? Because what you have in the last 20 to 25 years is you've got this dividing faction in the Democratic Party here, right? You've got the progressive side and the moderate side. Now people, if you want to just simplify it, you could say moderates are business friendly and progressives are business skeptics.
Worker friendly.
Well, yeah, I would say business skeptics, right? They don't think that the development and growth of San Francisco should be driven by its business, while some would say that moderates believe that, right? And the progressives think that and I think they say this with pride, you have to prove yourself. You have to show us that you're worthy. And I think that's crap, right? I shouldn't have had to prove myself to open my doors, right? That it did happen is fine, but I would never wish my experience on any other entrepreneur. If any single business that wants to open in San Francisco, again, if you can pay for it, you can do it.
But do you think it's the other factor where San Francisco is home to all these cool big companies that are big multinationals, and you get so much tax revenues from them that they don't really care about small business because now they're already getting all this support and money from big businesses, so you can afford to be non-friendly to small businesses, you think?
But then they're only shooting themselves in the foot because everything that they value, which is quaint neighborhoods with locally owned businesses, they're pushing away. I know small business owners who say, I'd love to open in North Beach, but I'd never do it. I know people say, I'd love to open in the Mission, but I'd never do it. You have this. Because here's the ultimate issue with these groups. What's the default answer to everything? And I don't mean just small business. I mean to transportation. I mean to any kind of change. Housing, accessibility. The default answer to everything is no. It's always no, because they're terrified of change. These organizations...
That would be sort of the definition of conservatives, because they're afraid of change, right?
Well,
but being a liberal part of America.
And this is the ultimate irony. The far left progressive, particularly as it relates to business, is almost identical to the far right conservative when it comes to the approach of no. The default answer is no. And our outgoing mayor, I greatly appreciate it, has said over the last few months, San Francisco needs to become a city of yes in all aspects. And if we just focus in on small business, the biggest problem we have with small business is we're overly regulated, right? I'll give you a perfect example on Union Street alone. Gio Gelato. Probably the best gelato shop in the city. I'm obviously biased because they're my neighbor and my partner and I love them, but I think they've got amazing gelato. Gio Gelato is technically, it's a gelato shop, right? Under the city planning code, Gio Gelato would be, a gelato shop, an ice cream shop is called limited restaurant. Full restaurant has all the bells and whistles, limited restaurant. Gio Gelato is not zoned as limited restaurant. They're zoned as a grocery store. So if you walk into Gio Gelato, he's got all the cases for the ice cream, but in the back corner, he sells pasta and tomato sauce and other things. Because if he tried to change from grocery store to limited restaurant, we already talked about it, 6 to 12 months. So instead of him...
He's just selling pasta on the side.
He's just selling pasta on the side. So how is that a city working for you when in the only way for that gentleman to and his daughter to open up his business, he said, I got to bend the rules. The code doesn't work for me. I got to make the code bend to make it work for me. I mean, to tell you things that have happened to me the last year and a half, I've had people from the city walk in saying, hey, you haven't paid the city of San Francisco charges me for having a point of sale system. I pay $75. It's not a lot of money, but, and I never knew about this. No one educated me about this. I had a guy come in and he literally shook me down. He said, here's my card. Here's your bill. You owe me $75 and you didn't pay it last year. Now you owe me $150. I said, for what? He says, you got a point of sale system. I said, okay. They're like, why would you charge a business for, you're already taking sales tax, right? Why would you charge me for having a device? Is that like a
regulation of the city?
It has to be. I to this day I haven't understand it. I'm not going to dive that deep into it. I don't need to be, barking up the wrong tree and getting causing people to piss me off. But like, why am I paying for having a point of sale system? Which then means that you're essentially telling businesses the incentive is don't have as many registers. What? Like, how is that?
So for every point of sale, you have separate.
Yeah, you get charged for literally having a system. So if you're a restaurant that's using Square, you got all the handheld devices, and you've got 10 or 20 of them, you're getting hit for
times?
every single 20 single time, and you've got someone coming in. I've had random people from the city be like, "What is this place?" And I was like, "Who's asking?" And they give you a card. I had one guy said investigator. never came back.
Yeah.
Right? I had someone, when we were in construction, someone from the Department of Building Inspection randomly showed up, surprise inspection. I said, you got paperwork? You got a card? No. I said, get out of here. And the thing is, that I am the exception to the rule. The average business owner would say, come on in, right? Let me show you what I've done. And then they show them something. They said, you have a permit for that? Oh, I didn't know I needed a permit for that. Violation. Good luck. See you in 365 days. We
I
had
think these people probably justifying their jobs by, because you hire all these people in the city.
There's a little bit of that. I think it's just a mentality, right? And it's a mentality of people who think that San Francisco needs to be essentially like encased in gold and never changes, right? That they moved here in a romantic time of their life when they were younger and they had these amazing memories. And it's going to come back, right? It just, one day that life is going to come back. And you and I both know.
Summer of 69. Huh?
Yeah, right, exactly. And what you and I both know, because we come from backgrounds in professional worlds where the only guarantee in this world is change, right? Yeah. And we have to be open to the change that is coming in this world. And that change, as I see it in the small business world, is being adaptable to how retail is going. Like, Neon can't survive as a workspace. Neon survives as a workspace and an event space, right? We break even with our workspace money and we make our margin on our event space, right? You look at, we're sitting in a space like this, China Live, right? Retail, restaurant, recording studio, private events. You have to be adaptable, right? I joke around. The refrigerator repair store doesn't exist on Main Street anymore. You don't buy your TV on Main Street. The world changed. And I think the fear of the average, we'll say, citizen in San Francisco who's been here longer than 20 to 25 years or grew up here is that they think folks like you and me were a bulldozer. We're not a bulldozer. We're a bridge. And we're a bridge to this new century and this change. We are the capital of artificial intelligence. That doesn't mean we should let them go hog wild, but that means we need to adapt to it and harness it so that it can make this city better. I'm excited about our new mayor because our new mayor has taken the approach of saying, San Francisco's open for business. Start your company, start your small business. We're going to make it easier for you. And that should be in every single form of innovation it is. Whether you're in media, whether you're in tech, whether you're in culture, whether you're an entrepreneur in food and beverage, this is the place to start it. But it starts only when we take the approach of the default answer is yes and or yes maybe, not the default answer of no.
Yeah, work from, And I've heard some regulations like, I don't know whether it changed it or not, but apparently in a city block, in some neighborhoods like Ashbury, you cannot have more than 3 bar licenses.
Oh, yeah. So Union Street is one of those neighborhoods that put a cap on the total number of bars. The Castro used to have that cap too.
What do you think is going to happen? Is it going to be a hooligan, revolt to the neighborhood?
I think you're viewing it from a public safety lens. It's actually an anti-competitive lens. What happened is you have bar owners and property owners who most of the time...
once you get in, you're like, close the gate,
Correct. But that's exactly it. And they lobby, and what they do is, you have to remember, part of the problem with local politics in general is, who's got the time? Who's got the time at 2 o'clock on a Thursday to go to a planning meeting
Probably people who don't have jobs or people who are retired.
It's retirees, right? People who have the time on 2 o'clock on Thursday to go and complain. You and I, we got lives.
I've actually sat in one of the hearings about somebody trying to open up a after-school math program for kids, and there's some competitor who has been there for 20 years basically lobbied their supervisor to say, oh, it's going to create congestion and traffic and we should not open. It's anti-competitive behavior.
Absolutely. And they have no problem doing that, because one of the things that I've never saw in my life before I moved to San Francisco is what I call the nativist approach. It's a xenophobic nativist approach, which is the first thing that'll come out of someone's mouth when they go to a planning commission meeting or they go to the board of supervisors. My name is so-and-so, and I've lived in San Francisco for X amount of years. So what?
We know what's going to come next after that.
So what? That doesn't give you, the time you've lived here doesn't give you the right or seniority to, it doesn't make your opinion more valid than mine. It doesn't make your opinion right. And normally those people don't want change, right? Yeah. But the interesting thing that happens in San Francisco is it requires catastrophe for us to innovate.
Yeah.
It took an earthquake for us to take down the Embarcadero Freeway, And now, hey, the Embarcadero is pretty nice. It took a pandemic for us to do outdoor dining, right? It takes an economic collapse of the city for us to say we need to reinvent downtown. It shouldn't make. We shouldn't
But
be.
it takes the open use drug market of San Francisco to bring down a government.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Have a new
and to create and to move us from being a very progressively democratic city to now a more moderate and what I would say rational thinking and responsible city that says, we're not going to tolerate open drug
of course,
use.
Republicans complain about San Francisco being the open use drug markets, but also like a bureaucratic society in some ways.
Unquestionably.
I mean, would you agree with that characterization based on all your experience, at least from what you had?
Yeah, I think I am fortunate because I have taken the time to build relationships in city government, and folks, for the most part, will help me, and I help them in return. And it's everything's above board, right? But at the same time, I don't think anybody should have to deal with that. Now, to directly answer the question of bureaucracy, we're highly bureaucratic. The thing that's so crazy is we are going into a deeper deficit in the city, yet we're hiring more and more people, right? And if you treat the city government like a business where, hey, we're in the deep red and we need to get into the black, then to me, you go through a process like any business owner. You say, if you're not generating money for this city and you're costing us more money than we're making, we probably don't need you. But the weird thing is, if you just look at the data, like one of the biggest moneymakers in the city is tickets and parking meters. If you look at how many tickets and how many fines we gave to people before the pandemic compared to today, it's like it literally has fallen off a cliff. Now, I'm not saying, oh, great, let's start putting tickets on cars. I don't like getting a ticket on my car, but like that's a basic revenue generator, right? Property taxes, sales tax. If you can't allow businesses to open up, then how are you going to generate the sales tax, right? Payroll tax. You have to make it a business-friendly place. The thing that kills me is people want this city to be amazing and they want all the great services, but they don't realize it runs on money, right? And the money that allows it to happen comes from commerce. It comes from tourists. It comes from people living here. It comes from people working here. The people like you and me who used to, be downtown working all the time, we're the ones going out to the restaurants. We're the ones buying drinks and having a good time. We're the ones participating in the economy. That's not the saying that they don't, but we do too, and we pay our fair share.
So with the elections and Trump administration and the Doge and all of that coming, you think it's going to cut down red tape and say America's back in business, you think?
It's a complicated thing because, I'm technically an independent, but I've only voted for Democrats in my entire life. And I don't like where we're going from a social perspective, right? I don't think these are the people who are going to bring us all together. But as a business owner, I don't think anything that they're going to do on a national level is going to affect San Francisco that much. I mean, there are people who are whispering that saying, oh, federal dollars are going to get cut from San Francisco. There's too much influence in the Bay Area to allow money to not keep flowing here. And I think they're, even the folks...
Or they'll raise money outside of it, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
There's enough rich people there.
Potentially. I'm more interested, the cliche is all politics is local. I'm more interested in what's happening on the ground floor here. I'm very excited about Daniel Lurie. I'm very excited about my friend Danny Sauter in North Beach in District 3 in Russian Hill and Chinatown. I'm excited about what's going to happen in District 2 with Stephen Sherrill. I'm excited about Bilal Mahmood in District 5. I'm excited to see a board and a mayor, essentially the legislative branch and the executive branch that can cooperate with one another because it's time for change in San Francisco.
So we're going to bring up some of the national politics also. As you think, I know you have a viewpoint about this, which is more and more regular people or even business people going into public service.
Yeah.
And you think that's going to bring more sanity into government? Or because if career politicians always be part of the public service or like this career public servants, it doesn't have a fresh blood and it doesn't... I mean, what's your take on, public service, huh?
Again, I'll go back to locally and I'll talk nationally. Locally, we're seeing it already, right? We're seeing...
Lurie being...
We're seeing Lurie being a quote-unquote outsider. It's how he marketed himself, and I think that was a big reason for his appeal and why he got elected. but also the people he's already hired. He's brought in the former CFO of Twitter to be one of his deputy chiefs of staff. He brought in the former chief of staff for the San Francisco Giants. And it's a fantastic question, because I was talking about this with my wife and some friends recently about one of my conundrums about San Francisco is how much talent is here and how
It's a talent's dense environment, actually.
insanely
Bay Area.
dense. But how few people with all that talent participate in public life.
They
And
think
now,
it's dirty, probably, a little bit. They don't want to get their hands dirty, for a lot of them, actually.
well, also it doesn't pay, you know? And I think you're going to have to find people, you know, who are like Daniel Lurie, who are going to pay themselves $1. You know, he doesn't. That's the other interesting thing about politics, whether it's national or local. There are people who need the job, right? And their life is continuing.
Yeah.
It's,
And I think that's part
source.
of the big appeal that Trump won, because people think he's not there in for the money, for the salary and all of that.
Yeah,
you
I
know?
mean, I would say I think he did it so he stayed out of jail. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah, but I think there's some charm in people thinking that there is somebody in it, not for their career
Yeah.
and the money.
Yeah.
But people want to make a change.
And listen, you know, I go back to 2016 when I said to myself, there's no way this guy's going to become president. He did. And then when it came around this time, I said, I'm not going to down him ever again.
Yeah.
He has as good of a chance as anybody. And he proved us all wrong. For those of us who thought that, you know, he wasn't going to win. On the people that he's brought in that, you know, probably don't need the job, there's a cynical side of me that says, how are these people going to use this to...
There's going to be
promote
self-dealing
their-
on some of this. I mean, like...
But that happens for politicians in general, right? I mean, you see politicians who go in, you know, to Congress and they have, you know, $100,000 to the name and they leave with millions of dollars, right?
We don't call it insider trading. We just call it,
and the thing is,
getting rich. Huh?
And interestingly enough, I think there's a lot of things we could change at a national level that have been brought up by both parties that for some reason the establishment doesn't want. Like, we should have term limits, right?
Yeah.
And you see people, I mean, think about someone like, you know, just as a Republican, like Mitch McConnell has been in the Senate since like, I think 1978.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, and there are people in Congress, I mean, Nancy Pelosi's been in there since the 90s, right? And does that mean it's working for us? Does that mean we're getting fresh blood and new ideas and the change that we need? Or are we just dealing with more of the same and dealing with more and more bureaucracy? And again, to me, it's not a Democratic Republican. It's an American thing. It's an American problem that we have.
But you have a unique perspective about people in public service. You think it's you believe it should be mandatory. Is that correct?
So I think for
everybody to do a tour of public duty.
I think we need, I call it GI Bill 2.0. 1944, Franklin Delano Roosevelt passed the GI Bill, right? And what it said is, if you participate, and it was specifically for the military, if you join the military, we're going to give you a down payment. It essentially was 4 things: down payment on your house, college tuition, a year of unemployment, and then last but not least was
They didn't say that. They didn't say that.
the last but not least was a loan to start a business, right? And when you look at the problem statements right now that I see with young people, and you can call me an old curmudgeon, whatever you want, I see a generation of people who are extremely lonely. I see a generation of people who are committing a lot of self-harm. I mean, just the numbers are there. There's a lot of young people who are hurting themselves. I see a generation of people who are addicted to technology. I see a lot of people who are, and because of that addiction to technology, they're siloed off. So they're only being shown things that whatever the Zuck and other folks decide they should see. So they're not expanding their outreach. They're not exactly, and they're not being able to do it. So what do we do now? Would I love it to be mandatory? I don't think we could ever make it mandatory. You would have exactly what you would always have. You'd have people working in their shoes.
Yeah.
But GI Bill 2.0 would be an opt-in thing. And again, it's not just military service. The military would be option 1, but you would get 15 to 20 organizations around the United States that are well vetted. Perfect example: American Red Cross, American Cancer Society, the national parks, Greenpeace, established NGOs and nonprofits that have a track record of doing amazing service. And you say, you're going to give us 2 or 4 years, right? You pick. The longer you give, the more you get, right? And what are you going to get? you're going to get exactly what the original GI Bill said. You're going to get a free college tuition, right? Because all that kids are doing now is going into debt. Number two, you're going to get a down payment on a house. Nobody can pay for a house. Obviously up to a limit. You come up with whatever that number. Maybe it's 100K, 150K, or it's based on geography or whatever it is. We're going to pay a percentage of whatever that payment is, up to a certain number, whatever it might be. You want to start a business? We're going to give you a loan, an interest-free loan for that you pay
Not
back.
all of it, but either or, right?
It's one of the four things you get. Or if you end up getting unemployed within some certain amount of time, you'll get a year of unemployment to bounce back on your feet. So you get one of these four things. And again, it doesn't mean you're going to go into the military. You've got all these organizations.
You're not advocating the Israeli model, which is more of mandatory. This is more of a
I just don't think you'd be able to make it happen mandatory. But because again, all of these things that you're giving these people are problems that we're seeing.
Because the rich kids are always going to...
They're always going to differ.
Always not going to do it.
But a rich kid's parents may say, I'm not buying you a house. You want to buy a house? Go work for Greenpeace for 4 years and you'll be able to pay for your mortgage, right? Because you're even seeing that. You're seeing affluent millennials who still can't afford homes. And so it solves a few things. Number one, it allows for people to get money for home ownership. It allows for people to obviously, branch out and meet people from all around the country from different walks of life so that we then learn to, instead of stop hating each other digitally, we actually learn to love each other in person.
Please go work for the DMV so we can make it better.
Thank goodness, please. And this is a kind of a funny thing that people would maybe like, I think it'll actually make us more patriotic. It'll make us love this country more because it will say to people, give back to your country, right? It's the JFK line. That's not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And you don't have to do it with a gun in your hand. You can protect our national parks. You can help kids who want, you could do Teach for America. You could help people who are fighting cancer. You could support the elderly. Or even better, you could get people to volunteer and work for their local government so that they learn more about their city. And it will restore our passion for what makes this country great, which is diversity, opportunity, and hard fucking work. If you give up 4 years of your life, you get something in return. You don't get a check just because you showed up. You get it because you donated your time. And then what I think is if you do get a generation of young people who are getting a free education and starting it at 22 or 23, they're going to get more value out of that education at 22 and 23.
It's going to be the next boomer generation probably coming out of that.
But potentially, right? You're going to have a generation of people who own homes and own businesses, and they're going to show us the way, as opposed to what I get a little afraid of, which is a generation that is just glued to their phone, that is being pushed towards division, right? That they're either going hardcore into the manosphere and they think, talking about your feelings makes you a wimp, or it's the complete opposite, which is, I don't even know how to describe what the complete opposite, but they don't get along, right? And I think if you put them in a space together, a working space together where they have a common goal, it'll end all of this this nastiness.
I'm going to end this conversation with a question for you, which is, with the new administration in America going into a certain place in the world in the next 4 years, where do you see America in after those 4 years?
In 2028.
2028.
Yeah, there's a great book I read called The Storm Before the Calm. And this author talks about that 2028 is going to be a major, major breaking point. Didn't say what direction it's going to be, but he thinks that, from an economic and social perspective, 2028 is going to be the big thing. I like to be optimistic. I like to hope that the next 4 years are going to be positive. I think ultimately, just with the people that are going to be involved in the government, barring some disaster, economically, we're going to be okay. Internationally, I couldn't tell you. I think in 2028, I think after 4 years, I think you're going to see a reformed Democratic Party that is probably going to take the reins. I don't know what life after Trump looks like for the Republican Party. I just think he's that good at what he does. But I think part of what makes him so good is not as a collaborator, is as what they would call a leader, but I would kind of say a demagogue, right? Yeah. People do what he says. And I think that only can last for a certain amount of time. I don't know who those people will be in the Democratic Party, but I do know that the only way I think for someone to succeed in 4 years is by being in the center. It's got to be somebody who can truly bring us together. And part of that is a vision, right? That's the one thing I get a little frustrated about, both local and nationally. I don't hear a vision for the future of America. I hear a lot of buzzwords and things like that, but are we really going to be a country that is still relying on, on dinosaur fuel? Are we going to still be a country that is, just thinking backwards on a lot of things socially and fundamentally economically, even things like antitrust, right? Where we've made a lot of headway in the last 4 years. We're going to go backwards on those things. So I always try and have an optimistic view, but I will say in 4 years, I think the world is going to be pretty different.
Yeah. There's this interesting observation about Trump was a lot of the Christian voters support Trump, had supported Trump, President Trump, because apparently, if they consider him as the next savior of
Many of them view him as
the
Jesus.
more human laws he breaks, it's better for him because that puts him in a higher pedestal because, God's laws are better than humans' laws. So it's actually the more Democrats try to prosecute Trump for breaking laws, the more popular he became, apparently.
Yeah, and it's one of those.
It's an interesting.
It's one of those weird things. Yeah, and again, it got turned. Lawfare, right? The idea that the law was being used against him. I think one of the challenges in this day and age is deciphering what is true and what's not true. And that comes from both sides, right? You see a lot of misinformation coming from all angles. And now we're getting to a point where we're becoming.
Now I don't know
more
who's worse anymore.
And that's the problem.
In this journey,
and you're seeing, even what we're doing right now is a form of new media, right? You're seeing a revolt against traditional media, and you're seeing, one of the most important places where I see it is in athletics, right? Athletes don't want to interview with traditional media. I'll just do my own interview. Athletes interviewing athletes, right? Entrepreneurs interviewing entrepreneurs. They don't longer want to talk to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. They'll just do it themselves because, as we know, all you need is a microphone and an internet connection, and you can start anything up.
Well, we appreciate your conversation today, Teddy, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.